And we are back with another episode of Liam Picks Fights. We are live for UFC 265. Derrick Lewis, Cyril Gane for the UFC Interim Heavyweight title. A very exciting fight card. And I have two massive titans of the handicapping space. Very excited about the guests that we have on the show for you today. First and foremost, we have Mr. AJ Schullo. AJMMAbetting.com is where you can find this man's work. He has been making a big impact in DFS and in the betting scene. We're very happy to have him on the show today. First time guest. AJ, how you doing today, man?
Doing great, Liam, man. I'm accomplishing a couple debuts here on your podcast. First time on your podcast platform. First time doing a podcast on it with you. And you got another guest in here that you're going to introduce in a few minutes. But yeah, good times, man. Great card. Looking forward to breaking it down with you guys.
Absolutely. I'm thrilled about this one and thrilled about the other guests that we have on as well. We were discussing before the show got started. Feels like we know each other already because we've been interacting in social media for so long, but lucrative MMA, James, the man of the hour. He is on an absolute heater. The man just can't miss on his most confident plays, and we're really excited to have him on the show today. James, you've been on quite the run, my man. Impressed by your work.
Yeah, boy, what's happening, boys, man? Happy to be on. We have been on a good run, hoping to keep that going here. UFC 265. In my opinion, this is one of the better cards of the year for betting. Obviously, everybody sees different things on the card, right? But just me personally, I see a lot of inaccurate lines, a lot of market inefficiencies, and hopefully we can break that down and give you guys some winning bets today. Happy to be on, man.
Absolutely. And I can tell you, as a degenerate, I see a lot of fun here, too. I think that this is a really good card. I think it's going to be entertaining from a fan perspective. I think that there's a lot of matchups that will be down to the wire, could go either way. And so I think we could be in for a really interesting night of fights. And without further ado, we could kick it off starting in the 135-pound division, bantamweight. It's been on a bit of a heater as a division of late. Everybody is loving this bantamweight division, absolutely stacked. Can't blame them. And we've got Johnny Munoz Jr. on the one side. We got Jamie Simmons on the other side. Jamie Simmons, we know how his run started out in the UFC. Not too good. Was fed to Giga on short notice. Wasn't a very competitive fight. And then we've got Johnny Munoz, who had a very competitive fight with Nate Maness on the other side. And, arguably, a pretty competitive fight. A lot of people thought that he could have won that fight. I think a lot of people have also been misjudging the fact that they're talking about, he should have won. But it was only for a illegal maneuver. No, it was 29-27 across the board. So he still would have lost that fight either way. But I think that it's an interesting enough fight here. I'll kick it to AJ first. What do you have in terms of thoughts on this fight? And how do you think people should target this from a betting perspective?
I'm all over Johnny Munoz Jr. here, man. Maybe I love him a little bit more than I should, but I feel like it's a good style matchup for him, man. I look at the BJJ credentials, black belt, multi-time champion. And when I watch him fight, man, he passes the eye test, even in that debut. Great guard passing. Looks to advance in a dominant position, and he is not one of these submission over position type guys. He will aggressively go for ground and pound, good submission threat, and he is relentless with them takedowns, man. I mean, he went for 16 takedowns in that UFC debut. Strong kid in the clinch, not the most technical wrestler, but I think he's got good enough wrestling to get Simmons down here, man. I've seen Simmons taken down easily from the body lock. I've seen him immediately put into mount. I've seen him reversed. I've seen him put in multiple deep submission attempts. So I think it's a mismatch on the ground in terms of the submission grappling. And Simmons, he's a power-based fighter, but where he excels, Munoz is better than him. Even in the stand-up, I think Munoz is better. Simmons has got some maybe pure punching power, but I think Munoz is better with his technique. I think he fights better at range with his kicks. And dare I say, I want to be, totally shocked if Munoz knocks him out. Simmons just doesn't look that comfortable to be on the feet. Giga wasn't the only guy to knock him out. He was also knocked out on the regional. So I think it sets up nicely for Munoz, and I honestly wouldn't be surprised to see the line climb higher by the time we get closer to fight time. Like you said, it's the first fight on the card, so people don't exactly prioritize this in their research, but I like a lot. We were talking about this on Lock's Pad. It's a similar style matchup. I like Munoz everything here. Munoz money line, Munoz inside the distance. Even the under 2.5 rounds is a reasonable spot. So maybe I'm a little bit overconfident here, but I think it sets up nicely based on what we've seen on tape.
I think you're absolutely right here. And, I thought it was funny. When you look at Simmons, he really seems like a guy who's most likely to be finished in any fight that he's going to lose. And like you said, what he really has that stands out, if anything, is punching power. I would also credit the fact that he's had some experience up a few weight classes. He's fought at featherweight. He's fought at lightweight. So might be a big enough guy here, but hasn't had a very impressive body, I didn't think, in terms of his physique. I feel like he wasn't cutting very much, if any, weight. And if you look at the difference in grappling, you're absolutely right. I looked at his UFC bio. It talks about he's a blue belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. We got Munoz Jr. over here, who's been well-groomed, I believe, as a prospect, and who's also a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, who's shown his class. And I really like what I've seen so far. Just want to acknowledge the people in the chat right here as I kick it over to Lucrative. We got Z's MMA. Shout out to Z's. I know a couple of us drinking out the odds mug. Teaser for you guys. Z is going to be dropping a new mug very soon. So appreciate Z, always showing love. We got Pain, fight predictions as well. What's up, fellas? Appreciate you. The GOAT, Tajik Bey, stopping by as well. So got a lot of heavy hitters in the chat as well as on the show. We got 24 live viewers with us, and I appreciate you all rocking out with the show. Thank you guys very much. Lucrative, we're going to kick it to you, man. How do you feel about this fight?
Yeah, so kind of echo a lot of your sentiments. I'm not as confident as AJ that he gets the win. I mean, I'm pretty confident he gets the win, but at the line, I'm not as confident if I was looking to play him. I think it's fairly accurate, minus 250 range now. I know he's climbed a little bit. You could probably put him that minus 275. I wouldn't put him too much over minus 300. As I say, I think it's fairly accurate where he is now. As the fight breaks down stylistically, obviously, Johnny Munoz is a wrestler at heart, right? He showed decent striking in that Nate Maness fight. Nate Maness gave him trouble at times, keeping the fight on the feet. And then he wasn't, out of his depth on the feet. And just a quick thing about that fight, to be honest, it was 29-27 across the board, right? So if he didn't have a point deducted, 29-28. But I don't agree with them scorecards. I mean, it was unanimous, but in fact, I believe that it should have been a draw. So I think it was the third round, if I'm remembering correctly. We watch a lot of tape, so it might not be the third round, but I do think it was the third round that I gave to Munoz instead of Maness. So he could be coming in on that fight and, getting a draw instead of a loss, which is what I think it should have been, in my opinion. But look, I think he's going to probably be able to get the takedowns on Jamie Simmons. But when I'm looking at this fight, right, it's basically a wrestler versus a wrestler, okay? Like, that's what they are at heart. Jamie Simmons is a wrestler. You go back and watch his regional scene tapes. He's trying to take the guys down. That's what he does, right? He just spams takedowns. He's okay on the feet, seems to have a bit of power, but nothing special. I couldn't find too much, and I know AJ said that he did, but me personally, I couldn't really find too much tape on Jamie Simmons defending takedowns. Now, I saw a couple of times where he was taken down, but this wasn't like the guy was shooting, traditional wrestling takedowns on him like Munoz will be doing. It was more like they was in the clinch. The guy kind of maybe just got hurt a little bit, then went for a quick takedown. I didn't really see virtually any tape on him defending takedowns, more than 2 or 3. So I couldn't really get a good read on his takedown defense. So that's what keeps me off Johnny Munoz a little bit more than some of the other people I've seen this week. But ultimately, I do think he will be able to take him down. I do think he will actually be able to submit him. As you said, Jamie Simmons' habit of being stopped in his losses, the levels in the jiu-jitsu, wrestling apart, are not the same. Munoz is obviously a much better submission grappler. He almost had Maness out of there. I believe it was a rear naked choke or something he locked in at one point. Not almost had him out, but he locked it in. So I think he's going to get a submission in this fight. I'm taking Johnny Munoz for the win.
And I also think that because of Jamie Simmons as his opponent here, he's live to get a knockout as well because Simmons has seemed a little chinny on his regional footage. I don't know if you – there's the one fight he gets choked out where they rule it a knee that knocked him out because, he was virtually out when the choke was put in. But again, it was an example of him being out grappled because he was club and subbed basically. And I think that that's a live possibility here. Munoz throws a lot of kicks and he doesn't have very good striking defense. His hands are very low when he's at space. So I think he's, inside the distance, I think is a much safer play than just targeting the submission because we've seen Simmons, even in fights where he gets submitted, they rule it a knockout because his chin has cost him in the past. So just something to keep in mind here. But we can move right along to the next fight on the card here. We have a women's 125-pound fight. flyweight division. Melissa Gatto coming back off a pretty long break here, 3 years almost, and Victoria Leonardo on the other side coming off of a head kick defeat to Menifield. So a lot of people not very high on these ladies, probably not very high on this fight, but I think that, maybe there's some value to be had here. I'll kick it over to the experts first. So lucrative MMA down the end. What do you think about this fight, James?
Man, it's a shit show when you're talking about betting, right? Because obviously Gatto's coming off that 3-year layoff. We don't have much tape on her prior to the 3-year layoff anyway. The last fight she had was against Rosa. The girl was 22 years old, so she's a young girl. She did manage to win that fight, but it was a little bit sketchy. She got taken down multiple times. I will give her one thing. I will say that she looks to be very good off her back, right? Because she tapped out Rosa with a Kimura. Before that, in that same fight, when she got taken down, initially she had her in a triangle or some sort of guard submission. I can't remember exactly. I believe it was a triangle. I think she tried to transition to an armbar. And Rosa, she didn't want to be in there, right? She pulled up. She's like, all right, let this chick get up. It then ended up going to the ground again. She got tapped out of a Kimura. So, tapping out Rosa, that's a pretty good win, right? Rosa's a decent UFC fighter. We've seen her get wins in the UFC. Yeah, we've seen her get wins in the UFC. Obviously, Brazilian fighter. Before that, though, it was a very different fight. Her fight against Sydney Rocha, right? And this is called a draw, which me and you two know that wasn't a draw, right? That was a 29-28, if not 30-27, clear win for Sydney Rocha. I don't know what kind of skullduggery was going on in Brazil there, but maybe her father owned the promotion or something, But basically, that was a loss, right? But I will say that, she showed some decent things in that fight. Again, she's 22 years old at the time. She showed to have a decent guard, but she was controlled on the ground, right? So it's not like she's this guard expert, which is what you potentially would believe if you only saw the Rosa fight. When we come to Victoria Leonardo, she's got wins in the UFC. She looks like a much better all-round fighter than Melissa Gatto, but Melissa Gatto could be making hell of improvements. We would expect Melissa to make improvements even if she was fighting regularly. But because she's had 3 years of not having a fight, she potentially could improve even more because she isn't in them long training camps training for a fight. I know she did have multiple fights that she was training for. They just didn't happen through COVID, travel restrictions, certain things like that. But in general, she's been off for 3 years, so she's had a lot more time to improve, right? Now, who do I think is going to win? It's a hard one. For me, I have to stay away, right? I saw Victoria Leonardo as the underdog, and I was like, this chick definitely shouldn't be the underdog. We've seen more from her. She's done more in the UFC in general, right? I know she got knocked out by Menifield, but she lasted 9 minutes of that fight. That's kind of a win in itself, right? Because we know Fiorot's a solid fighter. She seems to have decent submission defense, and I see her go to the ground with Liz Tracy a couple of times. She did get submitted in about 2 minutes or 1 minute by Miranda Maverick back in the day with an armbar. Look, I feel like that Leonardo is going to win the striking, even though it's very hard to tell. But I do think that if the fight goes to the ground, Leonardo could be kind of fucked, right? I think Gatto is pretty good on the ground from what I can see, although I can't say it definitively. I do think she is good on the ground. And then Leonardo, she's not a very high-level fighter, low-level women's MMA. She could easily get caught in a submission. So for me, I'm staying away. But if anyone's taking a shot on Leonardo, especially at the underdog number, I don't hate it. But just for me, there's way too many unknowns for me to be putting my hard-earned money on this fight. So, all right, I'm going to say Gatto gets the submission win as a pure prediction. But in reality, no real conviction.
Understood. So I was just looking at the odds right now on betonline.ag. We have -104 for Victoria Leonardo, and we have -116 for Melissa Gatto. So that plus money has basically evaporated. I don't know if that's true across the market, but I would assume that that's pretty reflective of the general tenor. So I think if there was value to be had on Leonardo as a dog, it's probably long since gone. But perhaps AJ has a different opinion on this fight. I also was kind of with lucrative. It's kind of hard to read this fight because of the lack of data, especially recent data, which is what you'd want to weight the most heavily. And so I think it's a little bit hard to make a clear read on this fight. But if there's some small investment worth having, I'm sure AJ might be aware of it.
Yeah, it's really hard. would agree that if there is value, it would be Leonardo at the underdog price, but she's obviously not there anymore. Gatto, from what I've seen, I mean, like, yeah, you guys said it, like submissions from guard, right? And she's shown some willingness to wrestle. I've seen her go for some trips, some body locks. So she knows where she wants to fight, and she looks to pass guard, and she has process, but her lack of physicality has, like you guys said, she's got some draws on there, some fights that she was losing, and then she just pulled a guard sub. It's just, whenever I bet fighters, I want them to have process to their game, and be not only have process at it, but be successful on a consistent basis. And, you know, purple belt in jiu-jitsu, I mean, like, yeah, she's got some submission capability. I don't doubt that. But the tape I've seen, she's just pretty lumbering on the feet, or she's pretty sloppy, not a high output striker. While I am worried about Leonardo's durability, she's been rocked several times in the past. Gatto doesn't strike me as a big hitter. Certainly not as much as Pharaoh. And so, like, yeah, I mean, Leonardo on paper should be the better striker, the Kung Fu black belt. And she should, you know, want to get the fight to the ground. That seems to be where she's most comfortable. You know, body locks and trips, not a great wrestler. But just like Gatto, she's got process. She looks to advance in a dominant position, and she likes to land hard ground and pound. So as far as the prediction goes, I feel more comfortable backing Leonardo, and this will go with a trend with some later fights where we just have more data on them, and therefore I just trust them more. I always want to prioritize the information that I could quantify, and that is what we see on tape. And while it's all fine and good to think that fighters improve, it's just, I don't think I'm doing a good service by handicapping fights, just, you know, banking on improvements without actually seeing them. So I feel like that the side here is Leonardo, just because there's so many issues with Gatto. You know, her takedown defense, her defensive grappling, I've seen her controlled for multiple minutes. The striking is a huge concern. I feel more comfortable backing Leonardo, but I don't feel great about it.
Understood. And yeah, this is a fight that I'm not going to take any investment on. One interesting note that I wanted to make is just that the over-under 2.5 rounds is set minus 115 either way, which is kind of uncommon for a women's flyweight fight. So just an interesting note there on the way out. Also, just wanted to shout out Payne in the comment section saying, I am on Leonardo here. So he's with you, AJ. You got somebody backing you up as well. Moving right along the card, folks, we are going to look at Miles Johns, Anderson dos Santos for about the 50th time, right? It feels like we just can't stop talking about this fight, huh, boys? Miles Johns, 11-1, Anderson dos Santos, 21-8. You know, this is a fight that got booked and rebooked because of COVID. I believe that was on the dos Santos side. So, you know, now the bookies kind of have a little bit of this edge on us where they got to see how everybody bet the field last time. And now you have Miles Johns, who I believe was getting more of the public action, opening a more significant favorite here. So he's sitting at minus 200, I believe. Let me check the current odds from betonline.ag. Minus 200, plus 170 is the return on Anderson dos Santos. So, you know, Anderson dos Santos here, a lot older. That's, you know, the biggest thing that jumps off the page at you. Miles Johns, pretty decent wrestler, can be explosive when he attacks, but I feel like his entries are a lot better than his control. I feel like he can get takedowns and blast through people, but he can't really secure them and doesn't really use his takedowns that efficiently. And I think that sometimes the combination of throwing hard with all of his punches and being very explosive with his wrestling exchanges leaves him a little bit cardio, you know, dumped towards the end of a fight. And I think that Anderson dos Santos has a very dangerous guillotine here that could certainly catch him on one of those explosive entries. But it's a fight that I currently don't have investment in. If I was to play this, I would probably be on the Anderson dos Santos side. I would not play Miles Johns at this price, but that's just how I'm feeling about it. I will kick it over to AJ first. How do you feel about this one?
Yeah, it's tricky because I overrated Johns in the past, and now I had to, you know, put my ego aside and really dive deeper into him on tape, and I realized that he doesn't have good cardio. To your point, I agree with you there. I think he's a good wrestler, but he's certainly not a great control wrestler. To your point, he could land takedowns, but he struggles to control the guys on the ground. He is, you know, submission over position to a T almost, and then, you know, piggybacking off of your point, there's fights where he doesn't even go for takedowns, where it makes sense. Against Batista, it seems so obvious to go for takedowns there. He just stands at range against Batista, and then Batista knocks him out. Everybody knew Batista had the striking advantage, except for Johns, apparently. He is getting better on the feet, though. He has power. He's just pretty basic with his striking, though, trying to set up the right hand the whole time. To your point, though, the age is a big deal at this smaller weight class. Johns is way more youthful, more athletic. He has power, and I know the odds maybe don't say it's the most likely thing, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see this fight play out and Johns knocks him out. I've seen Dos Santos hurt often. I'm sure you guys saw the same thing. Ewell rocked him badly. I mean, Narimani rocked him badly. Narimani doesn't really hurt anybody with his hands, except for Mike Grundy. But you just see him rocked over and over again. And then, the age, his defense is poor. He's just pretty stiff on the feet. And echoing off your point, there's a chance that Johns doesn't even want this fight to the ground because Dos Santos is the better submission grappler. So Johns should control where the fight goes. He's a more youthful fighter. He's a better striker. He's more dangerous. So he should be favored. But I don't feel great about him in general. And Dos Santos is certainly dangerous enough to make something happen. So I think it's just a flat pass from a betting perspective, though I'm picking Johns to win.
That makes a lot of sense to me. And I feel like that's sort of it. It's the bookies have factored in a lot of the information. And so I feel like now we're getting a pretty close to accurate line, where if anything, I feel like they might just be covering the Johns line a little bit extra. But I do feel like he has finishing upside himself here. It's not just Dos Santos with a finishing upside. And I do think Johns is probably likely to bank the first 2 rounds. So, James, how do you feel about this fight?
Yeah, so when this was first announced, I'd done a tape for it a couple of weeks ago, and I was heavily looking at the under 2.5 rounds. It was plus 160. I thought that's a decent price, for a fight where I give credence to both guys' finishing ability. I know Miles Johns is really this wrestler who will take you down and probably grind out a decision. That's what he would be mostly known for. But like AJ said, we have seen Dos Santos hurt before. We have seen Miles Johns get a pretty heavy knockout in his last fight now. I will say that knockout is a little bit, it was a little bit of a dodgy one because he did grab his glove right before he threw the uppercut, right? So if he didn't do that, I mean, who knows what would happen, but it's a fight and they're in there and they're swinging and things are happening. So he still got the knockout. It was a big knockout. I do think Miles Johns carries a decent amount of power, in his punches, just in general. He would definitely rock you if you let him hit you. He's a wrestler. Wrestlers are kind of known for that, short, stocky. They got a big overhand or big uppercut or something. So, look, I think he could potentially get a finish. And then I definitely think Dos Santos can get the finish. Very explosive, very dynamic, very, unusual type fighter. He's I will say, he's the type of fighter you want to bet on in general because he's not going to, he will just keep going for it, right? He'll keep, especially at the underdog price. He's plus 180 at the moment. If you got your money on him, he's not just going to lie down and accept bottom position. If Miles Johns takes him down, he's going to be scrambling to get up. He's going to be trying to throw up submissions. He's going to go for submissions, from any position. He'll go for the guillotine, even if it's not looking necessarily wrapped in. So I don't mind the under in this fight. I don't mind Anderson Dos Santos via submission either. It's plus 800 at the moment. I think it's a decent price because, as we've both said, right, or as both of you guys have said, there's just something about Miles Johns that seems a little bit off. I can't really put my finger on it. Maybe it's because he's slowed down in fights before, so we don't trust his cardio. Maybe it's because he stood up with who did he stand up with in the fight? When he shouldn't have. Mario Batista, he kind of stood up in that fight for a lot of it when you're you should probably just spam the takedowns on this guy. Maybe it's these kind of things, right? But it's something about Miles Johns who I'm not completely sold on yet, right? He's only got 1 loss in his career, but I'm still not completely sold on him. So I do think there's something lacking in potentially his fight IQ, potentially his cardio. And if that's the case, coming up against Dos Santos, very opportunistic guy, especially with the finishes, I do think there's a chance that Anderson Dos Santos gets the submission. And just as a pure prediction, I will go with Anderson Dos Santos to shock everyone as a plus 180 underdog and get a submission here. Rear naked choke, guillotine, one of them.
I love it. I love it, James. As I'm looking at this fight in terms of the prop market on betonline.ag, the thing that just jumped off the page at me, plus 425, Anderson Dos Santos inside the distance. I feel like that covers a lot of his win condition here, and I feel like that's a pretty darn good return. So that's something that I am probably going to be getting involved in before the night is over. Haven't tracked that yet, but that is the play that I will be targeting in all likelihood. And I also may go with the under as well at that plus money spot. Because I do feel like somebody's probably going to get finished here. One thing when I'm betting unders, I really like to see a high rate of exchanges. And I think that this fight is going to be a very high rate of exchanges. For the good or ill of Anderson dos Santos, I think he's going to put himself on the line as he always does. And I think that, he might be able to surprise everybody like James thinks as a result. And I'm hoping he does, because I think I'm going to put some cheddar down on that. Moving right along, guys, we got a 125-pound fight. It's sort of, get to work time for Manel Kape in the UFC. And he's got Ode Osborne on the other side here. This is an interesting fight, gentlemen. Kind of surprising to see this kind of weight drop from Ode Osborne, a pretty significant one from 45 down to 25. But he went from not cutting weight to cutting weight. So it doesn't really surprise me necessarily that he could make that if he was not cutting any weight before. So interesting to see how that's going to translate. Interesting to see if there's any kind of cardio drop off as a result of the weight cut, or maybe it'll improve his cardio. I will say that the tape that I did see from the regional scene, that it's not easy to find. I found it on YouTube. I forget. It was under the gentleman's name and then just the date that the fight happened. That was the YouTube link that I found. But I was able to see that Ode Osborne's cardio is a little questionable once he gets out of those early rounds. I think that he throws a lot into all of his shots. I think he does a lot of, what Daniel Cormier would call big actions, where he's throwing the flying knees, he's doing the jumping kicks, he's doing the spins and all this stuff that really taxes your cardio as the fight goes on. So I think that Manel Kape, if he's patient here, could be able to pick him apart down the stretch as he begins to tire. But I also think, obviously Ode's live to find that early finish. That's what he's going to be looking to do. But I think Manel Kape's a pretty durable guy. I thought that he probably should have won that last fight against Nicolau, even though I had the Nicolau ticket. So I'll take the win and also the information that, man, he's a little bit better than I thought, and maybe I should reevaluate how I view him moving forward. So, James, we'll kick this one over to you first. How do you feel about this fight?
Yeah, so I feel, kind of similar to what you say, man. Obviously, Ode Osborne, last fight, featherweight, Jerome Rivera knocked him out in 30 seconds. That was a good look. It showed us that his power carries up at that weight class, right? At featherweight, it's not just one weight class. It's two weight classes above this. I will say, though, that most of his career played out in bantamweight. He did take a couple of featherweight fights, but I think he only took two featherweight fights in his career. One of them was the Jerome Rivera. So he's going to, he's a bantamweight fighter who's cutting down to featherweight. He did weigh in at 143 pounds for that featherweight fight. So he's not like a full-blown featherweight that needs to cut 20 pounds or more. I think he should be able to make the weight. But at the end of the day, he's a big guy. He's going to have height and reach on Manel Kape in this spot. So it will definitely be interesting to see how he looks at flyweight, because even for bantamweight, he's a big guy, So, yeah, that definitely is something to watch. And maybe you want to wait for the weigh-ins to see if he even makes the scales, if he looks good on it. We've seen a lot of people, Nico Montana, I guess Ryan Benoit did well in his last fight, but the fight before that obviously couldn't make the scales. So we've been seeing that quite often. There's always some drama on weigh-in day, usually like one fighter. So Ode could be the guy here. But when you talk about the fight, I feel like Ode's live in the first round, but unlike you, I couldn't see any fights, or I couldn't find any fights of him out of that first round. So I know the one you're talking about is potentially that.
I'll send it your way.
Fight. Send me the link, man, because, it might change my opinion a little bit. Did you get the Corey Galloway fight or the Antonio Sanchez fight? It
was the Sanchez fight. Yes. Okay,
because I did want to see that Corey fight because it was a split decision, right? So it kind of intrigues you a little bit more. What went on there? Why was it a split? Why did one judge score it for Corey, who was an 8-5 fighter at the time? But yeah, so I can't really comment on his cardio, but if he hasn't been out the first round much, he's been out the first round twice, won one, lost one. The one he's won was a split decision. And you actually got the loss, which is actually better to see how he loses, actually. So that's definitely
he looked a little bit like a zombie in the third round.
Right.
Now, he actually, like, I would say he kind of made a tactical error. He spent himself looking for a takedown at the beginning of the third round, didn't get it, got taken down, and got controlled. Rode out the rest of the round from top.
Right.
So I feel like, and I believe that happened in the second round as well. I think he won the first round. I'm kind of drawing a blank now. I watched so much tape today in advance of the show, but that I definitely remember cardio did not look good, and it was what I was watching the fight for to see what his cardio was like. So I will certainly send that your way, and I'll also post that link out on Twitter for everybody to see that.
So it's interesting, because Manel Kape is the type of guy who he seems to kind of start a little bit late, right? Like he doesn't get going too quickly in that first round, but he will come on in that second round, in that third round. So I think Manel Kape's going to be able to take the punches that Ode Osborne's going to be dishing out. Obviously, Ode's always live in that first round. We know that. He's got quite a few first-round finishes, not only by knockout, but also by submission. So you're getting a fast starter against a slow starter. There's always a chance that the slow starter is going to get stopped. But I have seen Manel Kape be very, very durable. He's only been stopped once in his career. That was against Horiguchi late in the third round via submission. He was taken down, got dropped in that fight a few times, but he was able to weather the storm. So I think Manel Kape's going to be able to get Ode out the first round. And, Manel Kape's also live in the first round because Ode is there to be hit. If you watch some of his fights, he's extremely there to be hit. So against Manel Kape, it's not a good fighter. That you don't want to be there to be hit against Manel Kape, right? I don't care if you're a bantamweight moving down to flyweight. He hits hard for a flyweight, right? Manel Kape's one of the hardest hitters in the division. So I think that he's probably going to find a knockout in this fight. I think that Ode might start to slow down after the first round, and I'm predicting the Manel Kape to win via second round TKO. And in general, I think the money line of Manel Kape's fairly accurate. There might even still be some value, if it's around minus 200, because we've seen so much more from Manel Kape, right? Pantoja, Nicolau, very, very good fighters, man. Ode Osborne, what has he done in his career? He's looked kind of dangerous, I guess, jumping at Brian Kelleher in the first second, knocking out Jerome Rivera. But at the end of the day, man, we haven't seen anything for him to warrant him even being this small of an underdog. He should be plus 250 range from what we've seen, right? But obviously, at the end of the day, just to cap it all off, we can't cap Ode Osborne too much because we haven't got too much tape on him. He should be improving. So, he could come out looking better than ever, especially at this new weight class. But I will take Manel Kape to get a second round stoppage.
Absolutely. And I think that Brian Kelleher, is at a height and reach disadvantage when you're looking at that fight. So, AJ, how do you feel about this?
Yeah, I think, and I've been wrong before plenty of times, but I think the intrigue on Osborne at the underdog price is the length and the reach. Anytime you could get an underdog with a sizable reach, length advantage, it's always interesting, right? Because in theory, if they keep their distance, they could, hit the shorter fighter at a range where the shorter fighter can't hit them. The thing with Osborne, though, and as you guys touched on, he doesn't control range particularly well. I don't see him pop a consistent jab. To me, he's a counter striker, right? He's got freakish athleticism. He's got power, as you guys mentioned, but Kape also has those things. So those advantages that Osborne has over these guys that he's been beating are mitigated here strongly. So for whatever reason, he could keep Kape on the outside. He can maybe beat him, but Kape, to me, there's no reason why he would be afraid to walk him down. Kape has the better pocket boxing. I think his punches are just sharper. They come really fast. As you guys mentioned, he's got an excellent chin. Don't really know what Osborne's chin's like. He seems like a guy that if you close distance on him, his defense is pretty liable, doesn't do a good job moving his head, chin rather high for my liking. And unlike the Pantoja and Nicolau fights, Kape will actually be at a grappling advantage here, in my opinion, at least. I've just seen more from him. There's obviously, and I'm sure you guys uncovered it, the Sasaki fight, he looked rather awful, but he seems to have turned a corner, and I know we haven't seen him tested a lot there, but I liked how he responded against Nicolau, a black belt. He scrambled reasonably well. He was even okay taking Pantoja to the ground. A brown belt in jiu-jitsu is Kape. Osborne's like a purple belt, I believe. And Osborne, at least Kape has shown he can scramble off of his back. Don't really feel confident that Osborne could do that. We saw Kelleher take him down, submit him, and then in his Contender Series fight, he's getting taken down by his opponent, and then he relies on a guard sub. Like, I don't think that'll work against Kape. Like you guys said, I feel like we could just trust Kape more. He's been facing the much better guys. His low output non-wrestling style does concern me a bit, but there are levels to this game, as we know. And it's kind of interesting to see him only this big of a favorite, considering he was closely lined with Pantoja and Nicolau, who are just so much more proven than than Osborne at this point, right? So, and you guys mentioned the questions about the weight cut, the durability, maybe it affects his cardio. So anytime you got a guy who the last time he's been out of the first round was 2016, he just got a guy that's just stylistically, it seems like a good fight for him. He's much more tested in terms of who he's fought, how fights extend. I think Kape should be a favorite here. So I think he goes out here, gets his first win. And I do think he's a legitimate contender at this flyweight division. I just think he needs to let his hands go a little bit more to reach that potential.
Absolutely agree with you there. He's frustrating if you bet on him, obviously, so far in his UFC run, just because it seems like when he lets it go, he could really beat any of these guys or at least be competitive with all these guys. But, I also think that maybe it's a concern about cardio that leads to a little bit of that inactivity. And so we'll see how this fight plays out. I think it should be interesting. I agree. I tend to agree with you guys. I think that we're going to see, Manel Kape get his first UFC win. I was kind of looking at the under 2.5 at evens. I was looking at Kape inside the distance at plus 190, but haven't made any moves on this fight yet. Those are the things that I saw as potential value spots there. And, with James saying he thinks there might be a second round finish on the Kape side, maybe there could be something there, but haven't seen the finishing instincts I'd necessarily like to see from Kape to make that play. So I'm going to wait and see, but that was at least how I was leaning when I was looking towards this fight from a betting perspective. So we could look right up the card. Women's 115-pound bout here. Man, this is kind of a tough road for both ladies led to this fight. Luque Godinez absolutely threw Jessica Penne, doing WWE style power bombs and everything else to her. Her last time out, not a great look. Kind of surprising to see her get the win in that spot, in my opinion. But she played an interesting game. Jack Slack's been talking about that overhook triangle game. It was very strange, and it was somewhat effective because it was able to stall out her opponent, who I think had much more power and greater hand speed in that contest. So, man, tough look for Penne and tough look for Kovalkiewicz. Coming back off a brief retirement and a 4-fight losing skid. Not typically a fighter you want to back from a betting perspective, but maybe because of the style matchup here, there's an opportunity to take advantage. She has a lot more volume in terms of her striking on a typical basis than Jessica Penne. And I think that, as long as she's able to keep the fight upright, that might be to her advantage. But we've seen in the past, she's been taken down. She's been submitted before. So, there's obviously some concerns on the Kovalkiewicz side. James, we'll kick it to you first. Do you have a strong feel on this fight or not really?
Not super strong, but I will say I do think it's a good fight for Karolina Kovalkiewicz, Look, obviously the X factor is she got absolutely decimated in her last fight against Yan Xiaonan. I was actually there live for that fight, but I was in nosebleeds. It was in Auckland, New Zealand, where I live, and I couldn't see what happened to Karolina in the first round. Obviously, when I rewatched the fight, watching tape for it, she got her orbital fractured, right? And I think it was like the third or fourth punch in the fight. It was literally 30 seconds, 60 seconds in, her orbital bone breaks, and she was just never the same after that, right? She couldn't get anything going. She got taken down like 5-6 times, which is not really what you see girls do to Karolina, because she was just completely out of it, right? So you have to give her a little bit of a pass for that fight. If anything, it just shows you how tough she is, right? Which we kind of knew from the fight she's had previously, Joanna Jacek and stuff like that. But she got mollywopped in that fight, right? She had to have a titanium plate put in her face, okay? And now she's coming back off that suspension. So not suspension, whatever, off that break. I guess that is an X factor, right? But I think AJ will agree with me here, right? I think we both see the same on what I'm about to say, which is like, all of this outside of the octagon stuff, right? You can't really take it into account that much, right? Because you can, on one hand, you can go, she got her orbital broken. She's had a titanium plate in her face. She's going to come back looking terrible. Okay, maybe, but then also maybe not, right? Maybe she's invigorated from the break 2 years out. Maybe she's, invigorated. She might come back looking great here. So really, that sort of stuff, although I guess you cap it a little bit, 95% of what you want to do when you're capping the fights is look at the stylistics, look at the tape, and look at, make a decision what you think is going to happen when they get an octagon. Don't worry about the interviews they have. Don't worry about, all of this other stuff, potential injuries. It's a little bit, but don't take too much into account. And I'm saying that because I have seen a lot of people saying, she's coming off this break and, it might impact her. Maybe, but we'll never know. So I think in this fight, though, I will say about that, Jessica Penne is not really the type of fighter that is going to bring out that quote-unquote quit in her if she is second-guessing herself because of that terrible injury she sustained, right? If she's coming back against someone like Andrade, who's going to be in her face swinging bombs, she might be like, fuck this, last time my orbital broke, I don't want to be in this anymore. Penne's not going to be doing that. Penne's going to be doing pitter-patter jab, couple of kicks. She wants to get to the clinch. She wants to jump on your back. She wants to take you down. So I don't think it's going to be too crazy, in terms of Carolina. I don't think she's going to have to weather too much adversity in the striking anyway. So I think she's got a clear path to victory in the striking, although it'll be kind of close because both of them are not great strikers, but I definitely favor Carolina on the feet. So then it begs the question, is it going to be on the feet? Is Jessica going to get the fight to the ground? I don't know. I don't think she's going to just be able to take Carolina down. Jessica isn't a good takedown artist in general. She didn't really get Lupita down to the ground anyway in her last fight. She looked good on that fight because she was coming off a 4-year break. And this is what I say about you can't really take that stuff into account. She was coming off a 4-year break, right, against Lupita, who looked good in her previous promotion, great boxing. And then she beat her. So you can't really take, that break into account. TJ Dillashaw, 4 years, 2 years, comes back and beats one of the best
Did
fighters.
she beat her, James?
Well, I mean, look, she went to a split decision. 2 of the judges thought she won. So it was close either way, right? Like, when it was going to decision, I wasn't 100% sure that Lupita won. I mean, anyway, so, yeah, man, like, I feel like she's going to struggle getting Carolina down, but she might just be able to backpack her for 3 rounds. She might be able to make it a weird, cage clinching fight where she edges 2 of the 3 rounds. But I think the biggest advantage in either fighter's games is Carolina at distance. I think that's more of an advantage than Jessica in the clinch. I think Carolina can potentially have more success there and better success at defending the grappling than Jessica can do at defending the striking, I will say. So I'm leaning Carolina. I think it's a good fight for her. But obviously, there are a lot of question marks. But I will go with Carolina to get a decision win here.
Awesome. So, yeah, I kind of agree, but I don't have the confidence to play it, especially as the betting line keeps moving. I was kind of interested earlier this week. I saw minus 125 Carolina, and I was like, oh, maybe there's going to be some movement towards Penne. Maybe I can get involved here. And then I've actually seen the line start to go the other way. We've got minus 137 and plus 117 is the return on Jessica Penne. So, AJ, how do you feel about this fight? Do you think there's value to be had either way, or is this a stay away fight for you?
It's a stay away fight. Regression guessing fights are usually stay away fights for me, unless if I have a very strong read on the stylistic matchup. Darren Elkins versus Derek Minner came to mind. I knew that Elkins wasn't near the end of his career, but I thought he had enough left. And even then, it wasn't an easy fight for him. To be fair on myself, I'll throw in an example where that didn't work out. I bet Tony Ferguson against Charles Oliveira. I believe that a prime Tony Ferguson would beat Oliveira. Obviously, that aged horrendously. But you guys broke down the style matchup well. In theory, Carolina should just keep the fight upright, where she's a better striker. She's more technical. She has higher volume. I think that while Penne has an okay clinch game, Carolina's got a better clinch game with her knees, her elbows, just her overall damage inflicting. As you guys mentioned, Penne, she isn't a good wrestler. She's not a physical one. She's not a good technical one, but she gets a lot of non-traditional based takedowns. Like, she'll take your back in the clinch, pop on it, sink in both hooks, and then she's got your back. That is the concern I would have if I was betting Carolina here. Maybe Penne just takes her back. That's a round of control, and that's a wrap. She's very good with her control as Penne. Her black belt in jiu-jitsu is, I'd say her grappling is the best skill set combined that both fighters have. Carolina's obviously got the striking, but I'm not a big fan of her defense. I mean, Penne, neither of them does a good job moving their head off the center line. And I mean, I don't think Penne is a big puncher, but I don't think Felice Herrig's a big puncher either. And she was able to rock Carolina. Grasso rocked her as well. Then obviously Andrade knocked her out. I don't think the most likely thing is that Penne knocks her out, but that is still a huge concern, seeing Carolina, you know, again, with all the damage she takes, and then she's just gotten smoked to these last 4 fights, essentially. Like, she probably wins, but there's a chance that this line is just off because she's just not in it anymore, whether it's athletically, just like she's been talking about being a mother for all these years, but she wanted to put off until she was done fighting. You just never truly know. And James is right. I don't like to quantify these sort of things lingering, but when I couple that with just how she's been performing, like a prime Carolina absolutely beats Penne. I'm with you guys, but I don't think we're getting a prime Carolina. And that's not to say that I think we're getting a prime Penne either, but I'm taking a shot in the dark here, kind of like Michael Bisping versus George St. Pierre type of thing, but lower profile type of fight. You just don't really know what you're getting, at least in my opinion. So to me, it's a clear pass, though. I'm picking Carolina to win by the decision.
Understood. And so we got 30 people rocking with us in the chat. Appreciate all you guys. If you guys have thoughts, opinions on any of these fights, drop them in the chat. I will try and get them involved in the show. So appreciate all you guys. Like this video if you haven't already. Subscribe to the channel. We'd love to have you back next week. We do this each and every week. So appreciate you guys for stopping by. Moving right along, boys. This is a fight that, happy to report, I have a little bit of action on. I got half a unit down on Ed Herman in this fight against Alonzo Menifield. And the reason being is just because I feel like Ed Herman, despite his age, man, he's got a pretty interesting clinch game. And Alonzo Menifield has a very bad habit of striking his way into the clinch. You know, he likes to bull his way forward. And that's gotten him caught with punches before against the likes of Ovince St. Preux. But it's also gotten him just wrapped up in clinch situations that aren't optimal for him to win, especially given his cardio concerns. You know, we've seen Alonzo Menifield very rarely win fights that go outside of that first round. And when he does, it's very early in the second round, right? So I think that Alonzo Menifield, he's got a nuclear option early, right? He could very easily just send Ed Herman to the shadow realm. I think particularly to the body, you know, that's where you hurt a really tough guy who's so proven like Ed Herman. You don't really try and hit him in that big old noggin of his. You try and go to the body where Mike Rodriguez was able to hurt him. But I think that Ed Herman, you know, if this fight goes past 6 minutes, I feel like I'm going to feel very good about that Ed Herman plus 205 price and his chance to win. You know, I was looking at that Ed Herman inside the distance too. I think that should this fight get extended to the second and third round, Ed Herman is likely to find a finish. But my concern there is just that Ed Herman, because he's older, you know, the one thing I always fear an older fighter is going to drop off on out of nowhere is cardio, because that's one thing that I see drop off a cliff at times. And I think that I'd like to, you know, go deeper on this bet. I'd like to be more confident in Ed Herman. I feel like there was a time in his career he could have been an outright favorite in this spot. But I think minus 125 on Alonzo Menifield, minus 150 maybe would be fair. I just think the price is a little out of hand. Ed Herman's still a very talented guy. I think he could absolutely knee the face off of him. So I like Ed Herman. You know, I don't know that I would pick him as my outright prediction, but I'm betting Ed Herman plus 205. Most places are no longer hanging that number. I've seen it contract down a little bit, plus 200 and below. So I like the number. If it gets wider, I might go in for more. But I like Ed Herman in this spot. We'll kick it to AJ first this time. AJ, how do you feel about this fight?
Yeah, you brought up some good points. I definitely do not think Menifield has trustworthy cardio. Just his very muscular frame, his power-based style just naturally tires him out as the fight goes on. If it gets extended and I had money on Menifield, I would definitely sweat it out. You know, Herman could clinch him. He could tire him out. He could land some knees. Like you said, Menifield will just show questionable fight IQ by just wanting to clinch with Devin Clark, not trying to get the fight out in open space where he's got a legit chance to knock him out, even if he gets him hurt. That's a real concern. And like, yeah, I mean, that would be how I would picture Herman winning this fight if he does. I don't think he's going to blast him with kicks at range like Ovince St. Preux. It would kind of be like the Devin Clark type win. I do believe that Menifield has strong takedown offense, and Herman at this point, at 40 years old, is just not a good wrestler. He's a better submission grappler than Menifield. So with Menifield wanting to get the fight to the ground his last time out, I don't think that'll be his main game plan. If he does, he might be in trouble. But ultimately, why I agree with Menifield being a favorite is because he's just the much more athletic fighter that's much closer to his prime. Herman, watching him on tape, just seems very, very hittable and slow. Menifield will have legit opportunities to go out here and get a quick knockout. I know it's been a little while since he has gotten the stoppage via strikes. However, Herman, just seeing him hurt over and over again, like you said, he's tough as nails. He's never, he's not going to quit in there or anything like that. But he just gets hurt often. The Rodriguez fight, the Krylov fight, the Brunson fight. And so he's strung together a nice little winning streak here. And if this fight gets extended, I could see him winning. But by no means do I think Herman has a great cardio. He was huffing and puffing in that Rodriguez fight as well. So while I would like your bet to cash, I am going to, as far as a prediction goes, side with Alonzo Menifield here.
That makes perfect sense, man. And I honestly agree with a lot of the points that you're making, but I'm still willing to go with that play regardless. I know that I've got the better athlete against me here, but I just feel like Alonzo Menifield, that Fabio Cherant win for me proved nothing. And it was kind of just an embarrassing loss for Fabio Cherant. He just made a really, really critical error and got out grappled by somebody who hasn't really shown a grappling proficiency in his career. So I think that, there could be a little bit of market overcorrection, and that might be why we see the current price on Alonzo Menifield. James, how do you feel about this fight?
Yeah, so I just done tape for this fight last night, actually. I was on Chronic Combat Connoisseurs. Shout out to them guys, a podcast yesterday. Broke this fight down without doing tape. And to be honest, after tape, I don't have too much of a different view. But there are a few caveats, right? Just one thing, you said, the last fight against Fabio Cherant didn't show you anything. I will say that it showed me that at least, it looks like he's adapting his game or changing his game, because haven't really seen him go for takedowns before, haven't seen him get any submission before. So it's a good look, like you want to be an all-rounded MMA fighter, So, I mean, he's changing up his game. At least last fight, submission in 60 seconds. I was actually pretty impressed with that. Obviously, I'm not saying Cherant's a good fighter. I'm not saying it's hard to submit him for Menifield, but just in general, he didn't come out swinging, for the hills, lose his cardio in 6 minutes. Now, it didn't prove us anything. Can he go, can he go more than 6 minutes? I still don't think he can do that. But at least, he's trying some different things. I don't think he'll be able to do that against Ed Herman here, though. Obviously, Ed Herman, veteran of the game now. The guy's got like 40 fights. I think this is actually going to be his 40th fight. So you're not really going to go out and submit Ed Herman. Maybe he's got a lot more power. Maybe he'll just get him in some power submission, Kimuras his arm off or something. But in reality, I don't think he's going to do that. I think he's going to want to strike with Ed Herman. Ed Herman is extremely hittable, as we've all touched on. So it really comes down to whether Ed Herman gets nuked in 6 minutes, because it's a good thing you said 6 minutes and not 5, because he does have that extra minute in the second round, right? He comes out, recharges for a minute, and he's like, all right, let me do this thing before I gas out, because I know I'm going to gas out. I think his 2 wins after the round 2, after the first round, are in like 30 seconds of that round 2, right? Any other time he's gone out of that, he's lost. Albeit Ovin St. Preux and Devin Clark, they're decent UFC fighters, right? Top 15 UFC fighters. So, but I just feel like if he goes more than 6 minutes against virtually anyone in the UFC, he's probably going to lose the fight. Do I think that's going to happen here? I don't know, man. I mean, how long's a piece of string? I mean, I guess there's a good chance that Ed Herman does survive, but there's also a good chance Alonzo just takes the guy out. Do you know what I mean? So it's very hard to give a prediction, because you're basically banking on Ed Herman either surviving or not. So, for your bet's sake, I'll say Ed Herman survives here. I think he can survive, to be honest. I mean, you want to say something?
I was going to say I'm predicting Menifield, and I'm also betting on Ed Herman. So
there we go. So that's what professional sports betting is, right? It's not about who we think going to win. It's about where the market inefficiencies are, right? So look, I think Ed Herman has a decent chance of surviving, because, as you said, he does like to fall into that clinch when he strikes Alonzo Menifield. If he does that, Ed Herman could eat up some clock time. Ed Herman's going to start coming on strong late. He has got a solid chin. It is funny, though. He was finished almost 3 times in that Rodriguez fight. Once in the first round, I think twice in the second round, and once in the third round. And then he manages to win the fight, which is absolutely crazy. That fight is one of the most hilarious fights I've ever seen. The guy literally gets stopped almost 4 times. The first round, it wasn't too bad. He got the elbow and he was wobbly. But the second round, he was dead to rights. The third round, he was dead to rights. The guy covered up, I don't want to fight no more. Then he just gets a fucking Kimura, you know? So it showed us that he's resilient. I'll go with Herman to win this fight, to extend it, to Devin Clark him to win via decision. But in reality, you know, this is really a binary fight. Alonso early, Ed Herman late.
And I've got the veteran savvy on my side. I like that. Tajik is predicting that it is going to be a great fight. So salute to you, Tajik. I'm hoping for the very same thing. I'm just hoping it's one of those great fights that goes along and has a bunch of twists and turns. I think that favors me. If it's a great fight where somebody gets nuked early, I think I'm going to be ripping up my ticket. But as we look up this card, it keeps getting more and more entertaining. It's a great card. Next up, starting to round out these prelims, we got another bantamweight fight, this time between Draco Rodriguez and Vince Morales. Vince Morales had a pretty tough go of it so far in the UFC, but able to get at least a win under his belt. And Draco Rodriguez on the other side looked pretty impressive on the Contender Series, albeit not against the greatest level of competition, and came into the UFC and got nuked by Aiemann Zahabi pretty fast. And it was a really brutal looking knockout. He was kind of like stuck with his neck in a really weird position. So, a little concerning for Draco Rodriguez. Second knockout loss in his career, suffered his last time out. And Aiemann Zahabi, not that incredible a power puncher. So really interesting, clash that we've got here in the bantamweight division. We'll kick it over to James first on this one. James, how do you feel about this fight, man? It should be a fun one.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a really fun fight. You know, when I was doing my podcast, if there wasn't so many other good fights, I probably would have chose this as the most exciting fight, because I think it's like kind of a sleeper of a banger. And that kind of leads me on to a bet that I will mention in a minute. But just in regards to the stylistics of this fight, well, first of all, not the stylistics. Let's just say, like, everything points to a Vince Morales win here, right? I mean, the guy's way more proven. He's fought the way better fighters. I mean, if you compare the record, the resume from Draco Rodriguez and Vince Morales, it's not even close. I mean, Vince Morales is obviously in there with Gutierrez, did get his leg kicked off, but he's also in there with Yadong Song. He goes to a decision with Yadong Song, which is a pretty good thing to do. Yadong Song hits hard, Maybe you could say his power isn't as, what it's hyped up to be. But at the end of the day, Yadong Song hits hard. Been in there with Domingo Pilate. He's got a win over Aiemann Zahabi, who nuked Draco in the first round. So, I mean, if you just look at that, it's like, yeah, Vince Morales is going to win this fight, right? But then you look at the line and it's like -110, where it's like, okay, well, what are we missing out here? Then you look at the stylistics of the fight, right? I think the stylistics, it looks like it's a much closer fight than the resumes would suggest, right? Anytime you get a fighter that's, cleanly won against a guy who knocked out the other guy, you kind of feel like, he should probably win. But obviously this is MMA. MMA math doesn't work. And, just in favor of Draco Rodriguez, it does seem like Aiemann Zahabi has probably leveled up a little bit since that Vince Morales fight, because he came back and he fought Draco Rodriguez. And actually, that was his only fight. I thought he had another fight, so I was wrong there. But I guess you can't take too much from that first round. But I think Vince Morales is probably going to be able to box Draco Rodriguez up, but he has seemed susceptible to the leg kick. Obviously, Draco Rodriguez does have
very much so. Very much so.
But obviously that was against Chris Gutierrez mainly, which is his main weapon. But he has been susceptible to it in the past as well. I have seen other fights where he gets his leg kicked off. Draco Rodriguez will go for the leg kick very heavily. And as we know, right, and we'll talk about that when we get later in the card, when we talk about the main event. But the calf kick is a very, very important weapon in MMA these days. The commentators always say it. People moan on Twitter about the commentators saying it, but it's the truth, right? It needs to be mentioned. Every fight these days, most of the fights, we see, at least on the card once, we see someone's leg get completely destroyed. Ryan Benoit last week, and they can't continue. So will be interesting to see if Draco can get that going. Draco's got very good cardio. He's won fights in the 4th round before. He's got like 14 amateur fights, which is pretty interesting. But look, at the end of the day, when I break this fight down, Draco, he looks like he could be a little bit of a fraud. And Vince Morales is fairly proven against fairly decent fighters. So I'm going to have to pick Vince Morales for the win. But I wouldn't be shocked if Draco comes out here and gets some sort of finish. And also, I wouldn't be surprised if Vince gets a finish. So in my opinion, the best way to play this, and it is a way I have played it, and I'll give out the bet live on air now. I have played the fight doesn't go to decision at a plus number. I put 1.5 units on it. I believe I got plus 100. I think there's going to be chances for Vince to stop it on the feet. You know, Draco may have a bad chin. Eamon Zahabi's not really a knockout artist in the UFC. Knocked him out cleanly. Obviously, it was one shot. But then also Vince Morales, I think that he could even be stopped on the feet, although he has got a great chin. I think Draco has a good chance of stopping him via leg kicks or even submission. Draco is a good opportunistic submission fighter, and we haven't really seen Vince tested too much there, so I think that's interesting. So I think multiple ways this fight could finish. I think there's going to be a lot of exchanges, like you said earlier. Anytime you bet on a finish, you want exchanges to happen. I think they're going to meet in the middle. Neither guy has great footwork. I think it's going to be a banger, and I think probably someone's going to get finished in this fight.
James, you're making me feel really good, man. I have half a unit on the under 2.5 rounds for this fight. I looked into this fight pretty deep, and, you know, I came away with a lot of the same takeaways, which was that, you know, can I see Draco Rodriguez taking him down and submitting him? Yes, certainly. I could see him doing that pretty easy. Could I also see him getting nuked in the first round? Yes. Could I see him getting nuked in the second round? Yes. I don't think Draco Rodriguez has a very reliable chin. And I think that he kind of keeps it up in the air. He kind of keeps his hands a little low. He gets a little overzealous. So I like the possibility that either one of these guys could get finished on the feet. You know, James had talked about the fact that it was mostly in the Gutierrez fight, which is true. But the fight before that against Benito Lopez, I actually thought he won that fight. But he did get leg kicked to oblivion in that fight as well, and it was starting to really bother him in the later rounds. So I think that you're onto something there with the leg kick stoppage. I think that that's a live possibility. I think both of these guys could get chin checked. I think Vince Morales is the much better boxer, much cleaner in terms of his striking mechanics. I think he could probably knock out Draco Rodriguez, but I think either way, I like that under 2.5 rounds. I liked it at plus 115. I had missed the plus money opportunity on the fight doesn't go to decision when I looked at it. So I was willing to, forego the 2.5 minutes to get that plus money involved. But I like the spot, and I think it's got a decent chance of cashing. AJ, how do you feel?
Yeah, just like we talked about with Kape and Osborne, this is another one of these fights tailing off that point where we feel like we could just trust a guy a lot more. We know more about him. He's the more proven fighter. And like you guys mentioned, Rodriguez has the calf kick, but when I watch the two of them strike, I don't really think it's particularly close beyond that. It could be competitive because of the calf kick is so debilitating, but I think Morales has got better footwork, better defensively. He does have a reasonable amount of power. He's not the biggest hitter, but he rocked Pilardi, he rocked Benito Lopez. And like you guys said, you know, Zahabi is not a power puncher, and he was able to knock Rodriguez out. Just the way Rodriguez closes the pocket, you know, it goes along more with the point that he is very green. He's just, his arms are so wide out there, and then he just got hit hard with the counter. Morales, the thing that makes me nervous about him is he's a little too selective with his shots at times. That was part of the reason why he lost the Lopez fight, is he kind of tapered off his volume after he hurt him early on. But he's the more skilled striker, so I got to trust him to win on the stand-up. Now, you guys brought up the wrestling, which is interesting. It's kind of an unknown there for me. I can't really find a whole lot of footage on Rodriguez, so I'm more likely taking a guess here, right? It's the Contender Series. He got reversed. He got a guard sub. Good on him. Maybe it's good enough to get Morales down. I don't think Morales is a great defensive grappler. That was evident in the Pilardi fight. Didn't do a good job of defending the choke. Didn't really show good fight IQ there. Was brawling. So, again, I think Morales is the side, but do I feel confident betting him? No, I don't. There's a little bit too many holes in his game that I would like to feel confident backing him, even against a fighter that this might just be another levels fight that we talked about here. So I think it's a stay away. I do think that you guys are onto something here with the fight could finish. Anytime you have guys with such massive flaws in their game and they could, in theory, exploit the other's weakness, that could very well spell a finish. So that is a reasonable way to play the fight. And yeah, I could see either guy finishing.
Awesome. And I just wanted to point out right now we have minus 102 for Vince Morales on the money line, minus 118 for Draco Rodriguez, and that under 2.5 at plus 115 is still hanging out there on betonline.ag. So if you want to tail along with me on that play, then hop on board. If you want to go the safer route, follow James look for that best plus money you can get. See if you can still find any available. He's a sniper. You know he gets it while the going's good. But that fight doesn't go to decision. Take a look for that as well if you want to tail us. If you want to fade, go ahead and good luck with that too. But we feel pretty confident in that spot. So
honestly, I don't, sorry, just not to cut you off. I don't understand why Vince Morales was an underdog in this fight. Like initially, right? Like it's pretty crazy. I have no idea. Look, I mean, he opened up a minus 180 favorite, it says on best fight odds here. And you have to be careful on that because that's like one book and then instantly it changes, right? The market corrects itself. But he was sitting at plus 120 for ages. Like I've got no idea like how you can make Draco a favorite. He might go out there and look that, but we haven't seen it in tape. It's just, I don't know if you guys had any thoughts on that. You're probably as stumped as me, right? Because I think it's pretty binary. He shouldn't be a favorite, but just wanted to bring that up. It was a bit strange to see.
I do think that he has a lot of hype. I think it's in part because of that amateur experience that he has. I feel like a lot of people were pretty high on this guy, even though the betting lines didn't really reflect it in the Contender Series fight. I feel like that was pretty closely lined too with a guy that wasn't altogether that impressive, but should be an interesting fight. And, certainly I agree with you, Morales, now that you're paying that chalk price, not as intriguing, but certainly the fact that he was hanging as an underdog for a while, I think James is spot on the money. That probably was a miss. People were overlooking this fight a little bit, probably because it's a little bit lower level, a little bit lower on the card. But we got 35 live viewers rolling with us. Appreciate all you guys for being here. Please drop a like on the video if you haven't already. Subscribed to the channel. Thank you very much. And make sure you follow these guys. All their links are below in the description. We really appreciate their time and these guys for coming on the show, dropping knowledge for the people. I always try and bring the best guests that we possibly can get. And these two are absolutely phenomenal. Been dropping heat all show. So we're going to keep the ball rolling right here as we close out the preliminary card. This has been one of the talks of the town. We got people staking their flag on both sides on this. And I'd be lying if I said I didn't just put a half unit down on Bobby Green when that line ticked back up to plus 230. So we got Rafael Fiziev. We got Bobby Green. This is a fantastic lightweight fight. I've always loved Bobby Green, man. I've been watching Bobby Green since that Josh Thompson fight. And man, that's around the time I became a huge fan of the sport. And I just always remember thinking this guy was sharp. This guy's technical. And, Bobby Green's been his own worst enemy a lot in the UFC where he does a little bit more showboating and defense than he does meaningful offense. Sometimes it can cost him close decisions, but I really feel like Bobby Green is a very talented fighter. He's consistently slept on. Sometimes I should say this. I feel like Bobby Green is consistently misunderstood. Like sometimes he gets blown out to being a minus 300 favorite, which he probably should never be. But then when you start going out the other direction, Bobby Green probably shouldn't be plus 250, plus 300 against most guys in this sport because he's a very talented fighter. And, a lot of his fights go to close decisions, and especially in Texas, if we're going to say with confidence that, one person is going to win, if it's going to be a close optical decision, I think that's a little crazy. So if you're banking on Fiziev here, you're probably expecting a knockout, especially, at that given price. So maybe he gets that knockout. Maybe he justifies the price, but Bobby Green's historically been very durable. And I think that Bobby Green's a talented fighter who might be getting overlooked in this spot for the shiny new toy. James, tell me I'm crazy.
Yeah, I mean, look, you're not crazy because we're bettors, right? And we're trying to bet on lines and you bet plus 230. If you was outright predicting Bobby Green, you might not be crazy, but you'd be, a little bit crazy, right? Because I do think that Fiziev's probably going to win this fight, but I also think that the line is definitely wide and we just haven't seen that much from Fiziev. Now, I always say you have to be careful when fighters have had like 10 fights, right? Fiziev's only had 10 fights, but it's a little bit different in his case because we've seen him go out there and knock out Renato Moicano, who is a good fighter. We've seen him decision Marcus Diakiese, who's also a good fighter. So, we've seen him mix it at that level. It's not like he's 10-0 and now he's getting a big step up. We have actually seen him mix it at that level. And I do think them fighters are on the level of Bobby Green. They're actually better. Moicano's a better prospect in general. He's a better fighter, higher level. But one thing that I will say about this fight is obviously Fiziev's got great kicks, right? It sounds like a gunshot when he hits you with them kicks, right? He's a Muay Thai trainer over there in Tiger Muay Thai, which is the best MMA camp in Thailand. Obviously, Thailand, the home of Muay Thai, and that's what he embodies, right? He comes in, he's got an extensive Muay Thai background. I heard he has something like 200 Muay Thai amateur fights, which is pretty crazy, right? I know a lot of them Thais have that record, but I guess I don't know his background. The guy must have lived there for a long time. Maybe he grew up around there because to have that many fights in Muay Thai, you know, he's probably fighting every week. So he must have been over there for a long time. But anyway, you can see it in his fighting style, right? He's a Muay Thai fighter. And the thing about these Muay Thai guys, if you are going to give any knock on their striking, you know, is that it's the boxing, right? It's the hands. Now, obviously, they're still good boxers. They train it every single day of their life. You know, they're not bad boxers, but that is one of their, what's the word? That's their low point in their striking, right? Obviously, elbows, bar none, the best in the sport. If you get a Muay Thai fighter, you're not going to get any better elbows in any other discipline than Muay Thai fighters. Probably same thing with knees, the kicks, at least the traditional kicks, you know, the high kick, the low kick, the body kick. That's Muay Thai 101. But the boxing is usually a little bit to be desired for. And to be honest, it's the same with Rafael Fiziev. If I'm going to give any knock on him in terms of striking, it's the boxing. His boxing isn't as clean as, you know, we've seen from Bobby Green, for example. I think if it's a straight-up boxing match, Bobby Green is very live in that fight. We saw Marcus a.k.a. hit Fiziev in that second round multiple times with the boxing. We saw a.k.a. hit him multiple times in the third round with the boxing. In fact, going into that third round, his corner was saying, look, it might be 1-1 here. And I didn't necessarily 100% disagree with that. You know, you go back to that fight and, you know, the consensus around that fight was Fiziev just completely mollywopped the boy from top to bottom. He beat him soundly, but a.k.a. definitely had his moments. The first round was brutal, but after that, it was fairly close at points, you know, especially with the boxing. He even seemed to be potentially hurt from a straight hand that a.k.a. shot. Now, he had a poker face. His eyes were a bit wide. He blinked it off and he carried on walking forward. But he did land heavy. Even in the Alex White fight, Alex White landed a couple of boxing combinations on him. So, look, I think that Fiziev is a great fighter. I think he's a good prospect. I think he's going to be a good, you know, I think he might top 5, top 10 fighter someday. I think he's going to beat Bobby Green here. But I definitely think Bobby Green is going to have his moments with the boxing. I think he's going to land. I think there's 100% chance he's going to land unless he gets deaded early. And I don't think he's going to get deaded early because he is very durable. We've seen him get knocked out by Dustin Poirier, but, you know, the levels between Poirier and Fiziev, of course, is completely different, you know. And obviously that was a weird knockout because Bobby Green was talking shit and then he got hurt and then they never really recovered from that. I will say that the knockout punch that Fiziev landed on Moicano obviously set up with a body shot, but it was a left hook, if I remember rightly. That is the same punch that knocked out Dustin Poirier. It was that hook just over the top. So, you know, Bobby Green will need to be careful of that. But, you know, I think Bobby Green's going to have his moments here. So I don't hate anyone taking the shot. I do think the line is a little bit wide. But yeah, I'm going to pick Fiziev for the win. I think that it goes all 15. I think that Fiziev lands the heavier, more impactful shots. Obviously, the body kicks are going to look really bad. And I think there's going to be moments where I guess Fiziev just has the big moments over the 15 minutes. And that's what's going to give him the decision. But at the end of the day, man, Houtston, UFC 265, Texas, plus 230, Bobby Green pointing at you. You know, the optics are good for the judges. Like when I talk about when Carlos Felipe fights, pointing at your face. It's a good optic for the judges. The judges like it, is what it is. Bobby Green's going to be doing that. So, yeah, man, shout out to anybody on Bobby Green, but I will pick Fiziev for the decision win here.
Understood and appreciate that take for sure. Wanted to address, we got one question in the chat. George says, I found Leonardo inside the distance, plus 500, probably a book error here in Greece, unlikely to get corrected. How much unit-wise would you guys risk here, if any? I could say I would not be getting involved in that fight in any kind of large way, George. And we got the clean sweep, zeros across the board. So I would say go at your own risk. God bless you if you decide to take the shot. We're wishing you the very best. I got no action going against you, but right now, no, we would not be back in that play as the lines currently stand. Also wanted to shout out MFN Hustler, been active in the chat all day, said King Green, baby. It says, lucrative, where'd you get the Bruce Lee banner and poster?
You know what? I just got all of these on eBay. You can see I got Bruce down the bottom as well there. So I got double Bruce, nice. Man. Yeah, Bruce is a legend in the game. I don't know exactly where I got it from, though, man. Just type in Bruce Lee poster on eBay, and they'll come straight to your door, man. Pretty cheap as well.
Perfect. Can't beat that. All right, AJ, the controversial one. I was out on my Bobby Green Island. Obviously, I think Fiziev should be a deserving favorite here, but I think the line's too wide. How do you feel about this fight?
I feel like what you guys said is accurate about the fight. Fiziev should be favored because he's a bit sharper of a striker. He's more defensively sound, defensively responsible, I should say, and also hits harder. So that should help with the optics of the judges. However, cardio does concern me. We have seen him slow down more than once against White, against Casey. And while his takedown defenses look good, he also comes from a combat sambo background, which I think bodes well for him in general. We haven't really seen him tested against a good wrestler. And I know Bobby Green is an elite level wrestler, but at least in my opinion, I think he's the best wrestler that Fiziev has fought thus far. Higher pedigree. I know Casey's a strong guy, an excellent athlete, but didn't really come in with like a true like wrestling oriented game plan. And as you guys brought up, he was beaten up. That compromised them takedown attempts. And so Bobby, he's in so many close fights, right? He rarely gets blown out. So if you're backing Bobby Green at an underdog price, that alone is intriguing. But at the same time, Bobby Green almost never dominates fights. I think the only time I bet Bobby Green was against Alan Patrick, and that was because I knew he had him just completely outmatched. But in general, I'm hesitant to back Bobby Green as a big favorite for that reason. He hasn't finished the fight since 2013. While he's a capable striker, he's not the most dangerous guy. But on the flip side, he is very durable, as you guys pointed out. Last time he was finished was against Poirier. The last time he was hurt was Venata the first time. But good chin overall. And Fiziev, yeah, he's got knockout power, don't get me wrong, but it's not like he knocks out everybody. I mean, Alex White has shown shaky durability in the past, getting rocked by Jim Miller. Lucas Martins comes to mind, and Fiziev couldn't really rock him badly. So I don't think it's some lock that Fiziev just knocks Bobby Green out. And so, as you guys pointed out, we're kind of left to where it can maybe be a dicey decision. But yeah, I think it's a dog or pass matchup from a betting perspective. That said, I'm still passing. And yeah, for Fiziev to cover his line, I think he would have to probably get a knockout. And I'm just not super confident in that outcome considering what we discussed. So going for Fiziev here, but I think he probably does so in a decision victory.
Yeah, and I think that Moicano is just a little bit chinny and defensively irresponsible. And, I bet pretty heavily on Fiziev heading into that fight. And, that's why I found it interesting that, the line is so much bigger here against Bobby Green, who I think is a lot more defensively responsible and a lot more likely to keep the fight close. So I'm switching up sides here. Made money in the past backing Rafael Fiziev, still think that he's a talented fighter and has a lot of upside in the future. There's a pretty decent chance he still wins this fight. But I do think that the line is just a little absurd. And given Bobby Green's, just consistent work over the years. He's just been out here fighting very tough guys for a long time and putting in good work. So I like what we've seen from Bobby Green. I'm happy to take that shot on him at plus 230. I'm only in it for half a unit, but again, if that line continues to go wider, maybe I'll end up adding a little bit on that play on Bobby Green. But we're going to move right along the card, and now we are on to this main card, pay-per-view portion of the event. Should be very exciting. And we've got Song Yadong. Casey Kenney is going to start us off. Bantamweight is just on display on this card in large part. And this is a pretty good fight for both guys. I feel like it should be an opportunity for them to bounce back. I think it's a winnable fight for both guys. I think there's a reason it's a pretty closely lined fight. And I'm excited to see how this one plays out. AJ, we're going to kick it to you to start off. How do you feel about this fight?
I feel like the bantamweight division is absolutely stacked considering neither of these guys are ranked in the top 15. It recently took my top ranking, at least, as the UFC's best division over lightweight. But anyway, as it pertains to the matchup, the guys are both exceptionally talented. I think they're both well-rounded. The weaknesses that I see in both of their games, they share the same. They're both not bad wrestlers, but they have been taken down in the past plenty of times. And while they neither has bad cardio, they have slowed down plenty of times. And so when I picture these two striking, I think Song is a bit sharper with his counters. I think he hits harder, but Kenney has a bit more diversity, a bit more consistency with his diversity, I'd say, and also higher volume. Now, the volume is interesting because Song's threat of power could force Kenney to be a little bit hesitant than he otherwise would be. Where Kenney needs to make up some ground is through the wrestling. I think he's the party more likely to employ takedowns. Man, if I knew Kenney was going to go in here with a wrestling-oriented game plan, I'd maybe even bet him here. But he just doesn't do that. I think he wants to strike first. And I think in part it's because he's trying to conserve his cardio. He has high pedigree, collegiate wrestling from Indianapolis, even a judo base. But Song certainly isn't a bad defensive wrestler, team alpha male guy. He's a great athlete. He could sprawl well. And as we saw in the Phillips fight, a guy that I know he's coming off a loss to Paiva, but a guy that I think is a slick grappler, dangerous on the ground. He was able to scramble reasonably well, even reversed Phillips there in round 3. He even reversed Cody Stamann. But this fight to me comes down to who's able to get off early. I think whoever gets off to an early lead should be able to not straight up coast, but that the cardio dynamic makes me think that, that round 3 isn't quote unquote irrelevant, but I think who's getting off to an early lead should help. But I like Kenney here a little bit more. I cap him right around 50%, to be honest with you, man. So I honestly think that the odds makers got this right, that the public shifting it got it right. It's a very close fight. I don't think either has tremendous finishing equity, even though I think Song has more. Kenney's shown a great chin. I mean, I saw he was hurt by Bermudez a couple times, but not badly. So again, Song a little bit more finishing upside, but I don't think the most likely thing is he goes out here and knocks Kenney out. I think we probably see it go the distance where one guy's probably able to edge out rounds. It's the power of Song versus the grappling of Kenney. I'm going to slightly lean here with Casey Kenney.
I would tend to agree with you on just about every point that you made there, AJ. James, do you agree or disagree? Do you think Casey Kenney is probably rightly favored here, if ever so slightly, or would you side with Song Yudong here?
Yeah, I think Kenny's rightly favored. This fight's a close fight, though, man. Like, it really could go either way. I like Song because, he's got great cardio, keep coming forward, very good pressure fighter. He won't stop boxing. He's very athletic, very good at sprawling, especially early. He does seem to get maybe potentially a little bit tired towards the end. I mean, maybe not tired, but I've seen fighters take him down, and it's usually towards the end. We saw Kyler Phillips take him down more towards the end of the fight. We saw Cody Stamann have a lot of success in that 3rd round, especially. You remember mounting him. It looked very bad for Yudong Song right at the end of that 3rd round. Then it's kind of funny because Stamann not finishes him, but he's ground and pounding him when he's on the floor, and then he jumps up, roars after the 3rd round, jumps on the cage, basically like he's won the fight. But in reality, it was a close fight. But we did see Song have some deficiencies in the grappling there. But that's against Cody Stamann, who is basically an out-and-out wrestler. Casey Kenney's not that, he's a striker at the end of the day. I know he's got good wrestling background, but he is a striker. I mean, at least in his last 5-6 fights, that's what he's become. He will go to the wrestling a little bit. I've seen him go to the wrestling against Nathaniel Wood, but in my opinion, they were like half-assed shots, man. It wasn't even real shots. They were kind of just touching a leg just to keep him aware and then come upstairs. He really wanted to be striking in that fight. So I hope that's not indicative of, his wrestling in general, because I haven't seen, I know he's got this wrestling background per se, but I haven't really seen him employ too many wrestling game plans. And I do think that he should probably do that in this fight. Now, I don't think he should just spam takedowns, and obviously that's not what he's going to do. But if he mixes it in, it will probably help him win this fight, at a much decent clip, other than if they just strike. If they strike for 15 minutes, I don't know, man. It's like a 50-50 fight. I think I'm going to give Casey another 5% because I do think the takedowns, the trips, the control can potentially, lean the fight his way a little bit. Casey's a lot more diverse in the feet, meaning that not he can strike with more weapons. Song's probably has more weapons in his disposal, but he just doesn't use them. Song's a lot more athletic, so he has way more weapons in terms of spinning back kicks. We'll see that spinning heel kicks he'll throw, throw lots of high kicks, whereas Kenny's not that athletic, but he will throw more volume. He'll throw a lot of leg kicks. He'll throw teep kicks to the stomach. He'll throw pitter-patter kicks, jabs, 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 whereas Song's more looking for that one shot, although Song's volume is not the worst as well. They're bantamweight guys, good fighters. They obviously throw out a decent amount of volume, but just because of the I guess the volume upside in Kenny's favor, the potential grappling upside, Casey's fought the best fighter of any of them, which is obviously Dominic Cruz. Went to a split with Dominic Cruz. I did think Dominic won the fight, but it was still a close fight. Casey definitely showed me something more in that fight. So I think he's going to be riding high off that Dominic Cruz loss. I think he's going to want to come back in here and get a win. Yadong Song, he's obviously got the chance to knock Kenney out because Kenney is definitely there to be hit. Kenney doesn't have great striking defense, especially not to the head. And Yadong Song does hit hard, but Song's power hasn't really translated at the upper level, when he's fought fighters that are better than Alejandro Perez. He hasn't really been able to knock them out, So I think Kenney will probably be able to survive here, and I think Kenny's going to be able to squeak out a decision win. I just think he's got more avenues to win that decision on the volume and the wrestling.
Absolutely. Just wanted to address the fact that we got people in the chat talking about a potential fight cancellation for the Johnny Munoz fight. Dan Goldstein had said that New Zealand Tab has suspended my bet randomly. This normally comes before the announcement that a fight has been pulled. So I just checked Twitter as well. I haven't seen anything else about it. Just wanted to address that it's in the chat and say, man, I really hope not, because I'm looking forward to that fight. But if we lose one, we'll still have 12 fights here on this stacked card. So nothing too much to worry about, but appreciate you guys lighting up the chat and letting us know. And we'll keep a close eye on that as the event gets closer.
I will say, because I have access to TAB, obviously living in New Zealand.
Okay.
Sometimes, certain bookies, TAB, Bet365, whatever, Bookie Ladbrokes, if they cancel fights, it can mean a potential cancellation. But a lot of the times, it's just some bullshit admin that they've done a mistake on, and actually that has no meaning of the fight. So if you don't see a lot of bookies cancel the same fight, if it's just one specific one, usually it's just a mistake. That's what I've found anyway in my betting career. So don't worry too much, but it can also indicate that. So we'll see. We'll see.
Awesome. Well, hopefully that fight ends up remaining on the card. And so far, so good. We'll be waiting to see if there's any announcements. But obviously, weigh-ins haven't taken place yet. That will be the next site where we could see, if they don't show up to weigh-in, obviously we'd have a problem. But if we see these people at weigh-ins, we should be gravy. So I'm excited to move on to this next fight on the card. We got a women's 115-pound rematch. Interestingly enough, we got Tecia Torres, Angela Hill, old tough stars. And man, I think that this should be probably a more competitive fight even than the first matchup. Angela Hill's continued to improve in this spot, and Tecia Torres, was sort of on a rough run there, lost a lot of contendership fights, and was able to get a couple bounce back spots and really looked exceptionally confident, poised in her last spot. Arguably the best form of her career, granted against the lowest form of opposition she's faced in quite some time. So should have an interesting enough fight here. And I'm excited to hear what you guys think about this. I know that James had mentioned this might be one of the more inaccurate betting lines on the card. I'm always checking out the Lucrative MMA Betting Podcast, and you should be doing the exact same thing. So, James, we'll kick it over to you first, man. What's your opinion on this?
Yeah, so thanks for tuning in, Liam. We had a few live viewers today. I think most of them kind of understood what I was saying, which is the most inaccurate betting line on this card. Every week I've been a bit slacking for the past 3 weeks, been real busy with the bets. My number one priority, getting bets out for myself, getting bets out for the website, for my members. But I returned with the podcast today, and, I do a segment called the most inaccurate betting line on the card. And I thought one of the most, there's quite a few on this card, in my opinion. It's always hard to choose one, but I think the most inaccurate betting line on this card for this week is Angela Hill to win via decision at plus 200. Now, the reason for that is, look, let's just say Angela Hill wins, okay? Just while I'm explaining my argument, let's say Angela Hill wins. Is she going to finish Tecia Torres? Dramatically unlikely, right? I don't even think that's a word, but I wanted to make that as dramatic as possible. I really doubt she's going to be finishing Tecia Torres here. Tecia Torres is a motherfucker in terms of toughness, right? She's never been finished in her career. She's never been finished in her exhibition career, amateur career. She's fought Jessica Andrade, Joanna Young-Jacek, Rose Namajunas, Wei Li Zhang, Marina Rodriguez. You know, listen to the fighters I just named.
Killers.
Some of the most potent finishers in the sport, right? Marina Rodriguez is a great finisher. Weili Zhang, Young Jacek, even more of a decision fighter. Andrade, of course. Nama Yunus. These girls are finishing anybody they fight, right? Except for Tisha Torres. They couldn't finish her. Not one of them could finish her. In fact, she didn't look in major trouble against any of them. She had her moments in some of them fights as well. So I don't think she's going to get stopped by Angela Hill, right? In fact, if Angela Hill wins, I will actually take a fairly bold take and say that 95% of them winnings are via decision. It's not 80%. It's not 85%. I really think 95% out of the 100 times Angela Hill wins is by decision. Now, who's going to win? Who do I favor outright? I actually favor Angela Hill outright in this fight, right? Now, then when I'm talking about this fight, we got to go back and talk about the first fight because this is a rematch. So you can watch their first fight. It was a close fight, right? But Tisha Torres won the fight handedly. The reason is because she got her takedowns going. She got her grappling going, right? But a little thing that you need to think of is that was Angela Hill's second fight of her career ever, okay? And that was Tisha Torres' sixth fight. So it's not like she was a veteran. By the end of the day, it's Angela Hill's second fight of her career. She was a Muay Thai fighter going into that fight. She had nothing off her back. She didn't really know what jiu-jitsu was. She was a pure Muay Thai fighter coming in and, you know, losing a decision against Tisha Torres, right? I think the number one thing that has improved when you're looking at both fighters' skill sets, Angela Hill's skill set, Tisha Torres' skill set, they've both vastly improved. What has improved the most between either of them? It's fairly clear. It's Angela Hill's defensive grappling, right? Tisha Torres, yeah, she's improved her grappling. She's improved her striking. Angela Hill, striking, grappling. But the number one thing, defensive grappling, right? So that's takedown defense. That's submission defense. That is scramble ability, get up ability, everything to do with defensive MMA grappling. Angela Hill has improved that tenfold. The reason being is because she's dedicated to the sport, but also because she's had 21 fights since her second fight against Tisha Torres. 21. Tisha Torres has only had 11 fights. So she's almost had double the amount of fights Tisha Torres has had, which means she's had a lot more opportunities to get better under the bright lights at defensive grappling because everyone wants to take her down because she's a striker. Every person she fights wants to take her down, right? So I think that Tisha Torres is not going to be able to employ the same game plan as she did in the first fight, right? Which is go for the takedowns when things get sticky on the feet. So I do think that Angela Hill, although she may get taken down once or twice, she will be able to get back to her feet. She will be able to mainly stop the takedowns and keep the fight in the striking range. Now, who do I think is going to win the striking range? I think it's close, but I do think Angela Hill is a better striker pretty much everywhere. I think she's got potentially better boxing. She's definitely got better kicks. I think she's got better footwork. She's got a reach advantage here. She's got a height advantage, which everyone has over Tisha Torres, right? Except for Biana Van Buren, maybe. The only one thing I guess you can say, when you talk about intangibles, physicality and stuff, is that Angela Hill is quite a bit older, around 5 or 6 years older. But she's coming into her own recently. She's never looked as good as she has looked recently. So she's just a late bloomer. As I said, she was a Muay Thai girl. She started MMA late. So it's no surprise that she's coming into her own a little bit later than the generic 30 years old you're in your prime, right? So, look, I think she's going to be able to keep it on the feet, and I think she's going to win a decision fight here. So if I think she's going to win the fight, and I think 95% of the time she's going to win via decision, and I'm favoring that outright, plus 200 for me, absolutely ludicrous. Look, I'm not completely shocked if Tisha wins the fight. Obviously, she can win it. It's a close fight. I'm not saying Angela Hill should be minus 200 in this spot. But what I am saying is that Angela Hill should be the favorite. I think the line should be flipped. Angela Hill minus 150. Angela Hill minus 138, minus 140, minus 125. And then Tisha Torres plus 110 range. And I actually think the decision line should probably be like plus 130 for Angela Hill, and inside the distance should be like plus 700. I do not think her decision line should be plus 200. It's pretty crazy. So I've definitely got a play on that. And yeah, man, hopefully we cash on the weekend. I'm going with Angela Hill via decision. Close decision, but clear decision.
Well, I can tell you, James, they are finally on to you. At least my friends over at betonline.ag, they have dropped that price on Angela Hill decision to plus 135, almost like they heard you. Maybe everybody that was listening to your podcast hopped right on it. I would not be surprised at all. lucrative out here shifting these lines. Maybe AJ has a bet down too that we're going to find out about. Just wanted to point out Mbaye, I think is how you'd say that in the chat, says Angela Hill is old and looked like Dookie in her last fight against Yoder. Torres too fast, too strong, just better. Yoder took Hill down. I would even argue that Hill took Hill down and Yoder fell on top of her against her wishes. Like Ashley Yoder, I had a ticket on her in that fight, and I was baffled at the lack of attempts at offensive grappling. And just I was disappointed by the choices that she made, let's say, as a grappler.
You say Angela Hill looked like shit. Didn't Angela Hill win 30-0 in that fight? I thought she won 30-0. You know, we talk about 30-27. She won 30-0 in that fight. That was that was probably the most domination Angela Hill has ever had in any fight. So I don't know what the Bay is talking about.
I hear you for sure, James. I would think that she talks I would think that the criticism of Angela Hill in that fight would just be that, again, like without much pressure from Ashley Yoder, like based on her own style, she just took herself down, getting over aggressive with the knees in the clinch, which has happened before. But yeah, I don't know that would mean she looked like Dookie, which is how I politely rephrased, obviously. But I really thought that Angela Hill looked impressive in that fight. And I say that as a Yoder backer and as somebody who's, had a hard time backing Angela Hill since that Michelle Waterson fight, which I felt like she won, but I just felt like she faded a little bit down the stretch there. But this isn't a 5-round fight. I think that there's a lot of credence to what the points James is making and saying. So let's hear what AJ has to say.
Yeah, whenever we look at rematches, it's always something we want to look at how the first fight played out. And it's notable, I think, but when we have such a wide gap as to when it took place, it goes to show the fighters are essentially more evolved versions of themselves. And I look to see if the same sort of result could be implemented by the winning party. And as you guys brought up, Hill has massively improved her defensive wrestling and grappling. She's a dedicated fighter. She has done work closely with Wilson Hayes, a former UFC fighter who's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. I mean, these days you could take Hill down, but it's not easy. And even when you get her down, her guard is difficult to pass. She's difficult to land a lot of damage on. It's basically just control. We saw Michelle Waterson control her for a bit. Didn't really do much beyond that. Gedalia, same thing. High-level black belt, controlled her. That was pretty much it. And so Torres, she's the fighter more willing to go for the takedowns, but I think she's going to have a difficult time, controlling Hill. And even if she takes Hill down, I think she's going to have a difficult time controlling her. Fight seems to be won or lost in the feet. Torres, I think she's got better diversity in terms of her kicks. She's more willing to throw them. Both are very good combination strikers. However, Hill has the reach advantage. She has the volume advantage. I think her punches are a bit sharper, her straight punches specifically. Torres has been able to win these last two fights impressively. She had her back up against the wall against Van Buren, left no doubt. However, she was able to aggressively pursue these women, fire off combinations, and didn't have a whole lot to respect coming back. Van Buren had some threats, but not a lot, not nearly as much as Hill will. Hill has more power. Not that I'm expecting a knockout, but her punches should have a little bit more sting on them. Maybe that helps the optics of the judges. And so I do agree with James. It's a dog or pass matchup. I think Torres is the favorite because people love to look at rematches and look at the first fight and act as if that is the end all be all to predicting how the rematch will go. I mean, while the fighter could win, it's just, I don't think Torres will win in the same way that she did the first time. Anything is possible, but it just doesn't seem likely. And so that's just an edge that I like to exploit with these sorts of fights. And especially when we have the fact that the dynamic hasn't changed a whole lot. The Yoder versus Hill rematch was relevant because the makeup of the fight didn't change. Yoder had to get the fight to the ground. Otherwise she was going to get stuck and pieced up on the feet. And that's exactly what happened. Only Hill this time in a more lopsided manner beat her because she improved, and Yoder didn't improve nearly as much. If anything, she more so plateaued. And so that's what I look at when rematches. It's not as simple as just looking at who won the first time and saying, oh, they won the first time, therefore they're going to win again. That is too big of a jump to make. We work too hard at this to make that convenient of a decision. We got to look at the makeup and in the film and see what has changed in the meantime. And both women have changed immensely. But I think James brought up a good point in that the biggest improvement between both of them by far was the takedown defense and defensive grappling of Hill. Look at that fight against Random Marcos. That was not good. Taken down, guard pass, arm barred. But since then, it hasn't been that big of an issue here. So I know that there's a narrative out there that Hill, she loses some close decisions. Maybe she should win. This very well could be another close decision, but I really do truly believe from a betting perspective, it's dog or pass. And I'm predicting Hill to win outright. So.
Absolutely. I think that has a lot of credence, and I wanted to shout out a couple people in the chat as well. George says, the fact that I consider betting a split decision prop says a lot about the state of judging in the UFC, and that's the one thing that really keeps jumping out to me on this fight. Is this going to be a close fight? Yes, I expect that. And if we got Texas judges, we got a close fight, it really must be a dog or pass type situation. I don't think there's a ton of finishing upside on either side. So if you really feel like you need to line up behind your fighter here, go with what James has mentioned, those decision props. Both of them are at plus money. I think it's plus 125 on the Torres side, plus 135 for Angela Hill. So I think if you wanted to get involved either way, that's how you line up behind your fighter, but recognize we're going to be in for a wonky decision in all likelihood, one way or the other. And that's why you want it to be with plus money if it's going to be a toss-up type of fight. James, you had something?
Yes, just before you move on, you said plus one, because I've just got best fight odds up now. Bet Online has got Angela Hill plus 135, but the worst price in the market after that is plus 175.
Wow.
So a huge swing.
Bet Online is early to the party then.
Yeah, they know.
Listening to your podcast, man. You got it blocked.
And, they are usually, well, these days, they're definitely the market starters, the market movers. They are the most sharp book in MMA. So it's no surprise. But we don't usually see a big gap like that. So if you use any other bookie than Bet Online, jump on the Hill decision now if you want to bet her. I'm seeing plus 225 on more than one book. You can get plus 200, plus 195. So,
nice.
yeah, you can still get that price. So anyone watching, if you fancy it, jump on another book.
Go do your shopping right now. Go look around at your books, find the best price that you can. Also, Hunter is agreeing that Hill almost KO'd Yoder. I think that's fair. He said that he was sweating the Hill by decision ticket, but he thought that the takedown was a fluke. Appreciate you, Hunter, for hopping in the chat. Uncle Wheezy stopping by the party. Appreciate you, Uncle Wheezy. We got somebody else shouting you out for Stat Diggers. Great program. Sundays, guys, if you haven't checked it out already, worth checking out. Stat Diggers, DFS by the numbers, Uncle Wheezy, really good show. And it's a great way to kick off your cap, and like to keep it on in the background while we're doing some tape, get the weekend rolling right. So also wanted to shout out Monk MMA, MMA Tactics, it looks like, MMA Addicts. Appreciate you. More lucrative and AJ on Liam Picks. Okay, I'll tune in, I guess. Great show, guys. Appreciate you. Thank you very much for stopping by. And last but not least, the man of the hour, too sweet to be sour, Z's MMA, says, Hunter giving me post-traumatic bet disorder. I had Hill inside the distance there. Oh, Z, sorry, man. You're the only person ever bet an Angela Hill inside the distance. But, boy, do I appreciate you when you do. And we wish you the best of luck if you got another one going this weekend. So moving right along, guys, I would say that this is like the cream of the crop in terms of this card. We're at the peak, boys. We're gradually working our way up this slope, and it's just getting better and better. I'm really excited about this fight. Vicente Luque, one of my favorite fighters in the UFC, if I'm being honest, and Michael Chiesa on the other side. Really good fight. Should be a lot of fun. Welterweight banger. You've heard enough from me. We'll kick it to James. James, drop the expert opinion. What do you think about this fantastic welterweight matchup?
Yeah, I think what almost everyone else thinks, man, or at least what I've seen. I do think Michael Chiesa is probably going to be able to get his win condition going with the grappling here. Obviously, Luque, there's a big skill gap on the feet. Luque will box, will kick, will MMA strike. Chiesa up on the feet. But Chiesa doesn't play that game, man. I go back to the Anthony Pettis fight, right? And this wasn't too long ago, 2-3 years ago now, when Chiesa fought Pettis, right? He's rushing in like a lunatic, gets hurt badly in that fight, ends up getting submitted from Anthony Pettis' guard. Since then, I've seen him shore up his striking a lot better. Look, his striking's never going to be on the level of of Vicente Luque, but he's definitely got better than that fight, for example. I see he takes a lot more time to close the distance now. He doesn't rush in. He pumps his jab a lot more. His range control is a lot better. He's more patient. He breathes more in there. You know, just in general, he looks like a more refined striker, or at least the MMA striker, you know, not a pure striker with his techniques. Maybe his high kick isn't, you know, that much better, but in general, the way he throws his MMA striking techniques or sets them up is a lot more refined now, you know, which it needs to be, because his game is obviously the grappling, right? So he can't be waning in with crazy strikes, because he'll get caught like he's done in a few fights, you know, especially the Anthony Pettis fight. Obviously, after the Pettis fight, he moved up now to welterweight. So maybe that's something to do with it. Maybe in welterweight, he just feels better. He's a bigger, natural guy, doesn't cut weight. Maybe he's able to be more calm in there. You know, maybe it's a coincidence that after that fight, have seen a big improvement in his striking, not the grappling, which is what's been winning him the fight, the grappling, right? So then you go to Vicente Luque, right? The guy is an absolute killer. You said he's one of your favorite fighters. Of course, he's one of your favorite fighters. You know, he's probably one of the most exciting fighters in UFC history. The guy doesn't know what a decision is, you know, unless he's getting beat, because he's tough as fuck. Then he does go to decision. But anytime he's winning, he's knocking them out. You know, Tyron Woodley, what a great fight that was. Randy Brown, Nico Price. I mean, yeah, I mean, the guy, you know, the guy is such a treasure to watch. You know, everybody loves watching him. But if you go back and look on his record, he hasn't really fought any grapplers, man. I mean, he hasn't fought someone who's going to implement that heavy grappling game plan. I'll just read off his fights from his last fight, and I'll go down a little bit. Tyron Woodley. He's not a grappler, right? Especially not in 2021. Yeah, grappling background, whatever you want to call it. Tyron Woodley is a striker. You know, he's an overhand striker. He'll go for takedowns every now and then. The dude's standing only with Carlos Condit, standing only basically with Wonderboy. The guy's a striker. Don't care about his background. Randy Brown, striker. Nico Price, striker. Stephen Thompson, striker. Mike Perry, you know, maybe he's a grappler nowadays, but he was a striker back in 2019. Barberina, Jalen Turner, Nico Price again, Leon Edwards implemented takedowns and got the win. But basically, Vicente Luque's never been up really against a striker, right? We haven't seen his takedown defense. I guess Bilal Muhammad a little bit, but that fight ended in 2 minutes. We haven't seen his takedown defense that much. I do think he's got good takedown defense, but we haven't seen it, you know, tested by someone on the level as Michael Chiesa. So I think Michael Chiesa is probably going to be able to close distance. I think he's going to make it a grappling fight. One thing about Luque is that he will kind of oblige into the fight his opponent wants. You know, we've seen him multiple times picking apart someone from range, and then he just gets sucked into a brawl where he has a big chance of losing for no reason. Even in the Leon Edwards fight, that fight was a grappling fight for like 15 minutes, right? Obviously, they broke away and there was a few punches and kicks, but that fight was heavily in the grappling for 15 minutes. Now, you know, I don't know, did he want to do that himself? Maybe, because he did implement the takedown, the wrestling game plan in round one. But in my opinion, he's a striker, so it was more like he was falling into Leon Edwards, who wanted to be more in the clinch and stuff. So I think Luque kind of has this, I don't know what you would call it, but it's just a tendency that he kind of falls into his opponent's game plans a lot of the time. Not all the time, but we have seen it. And Michael Chiesa is that type of guy that, you know, if he wants a grappling fight, he can force the issue, man. It's very hard to just completely avoid the grappling with Michael Chiesa. Even in the Anthony Pettis fight, this guy's an out-and-out striker, and he ended up grappling with Michael Chiesa for like the whole fight, apart from the strike he landed, right? And then he tapped him out. This might be a hot take, but I'm actually a little bit more worried about the submission of Vicente Luque than the knockout. Because as I say, I do think it's going to be a grappling fight. And I do think Luque is a very, very good submission grappler, very good opportunistic grappler. Too excited about this fight, boys. I can't stop talking fast. I think he's an opportunistic grappler. And I do think Michael Chiesa, even though he's a good submission fighter, he's a good grappler in general, he leaves himself open to be submitted. We've seen it multiple times in the past. Submitted, just going on his record now. Submitted by Pettis. Obviously, I talked about that. Kevin Lee, we know he got choked out. Did he? Did he not? I don't know, but he still got choked out. Joe Lawson, that was a cut. Masvidal put him in a Darce choke. So I remember he was in a submission from Carlos Condit. So it's definitely live. But ultimately, I think Chiesa, especially at the underdog price, I think that might have gone now, but you know, he was an underdog for a while, especially he was a bigger underdog a few weeks ago. But yeah, man, I think Chiesa is going to be able to get his grappling going, and I think he's going to make it one of them one of them traditional Chiesa fights. And yeah, I think he gets a decision win over Neil Magny. Over Vicente Luque.
Man, I could definitely see a lot of the points that you're making, and I think that it's not out of the realm of possibility. I think it's certainly, quite likely that Chiesa is going to be forcing the issue, but I do think that this could be one of those fights where he's winning up until the point where he loses. And I think that James is so right to point out that it could be a submission. Everybody thinks of Michael Chiesa as a grappler, and so they forget that his biggest liability is the fact that he can be out grappled. As well as he can out-grapple somebody. He can do very well. He's a great offensive threat, but he could give up positions. And once he gives up the positions, he doesn't always exercise the greatest decision-making, kind of rush trying to get up against Kevin Lee. And, I thought that was, whether he was out right then or he was going to be out a second later, for me, it was pretty elementary. But I really think that this is a heck of a fight. I think it could go either way. I do think it's a fight that, it's a pick 'em right now on betonline.ag, -110 either way. Tajik Bey in the comments saying close fight, can go either way, no bet. And man, I'm sort of feeling the same way. I'm not seeing full prop markets released for this fight. Otherwise, I'd be looking at that Luque submission ticket, which I think would be at a ridiculous plus number. And I do think that Luque just has answers to people taking shot takedowns, which would be that Darce choke series. He's money from that series. Granted, the upper body takedowns of Chiesa, a little bit of a concern. I just think that because we haven't seen data on Luque's grappling in the octagon in so long, it really could be that it's improved significantly. I think that's like a variable for me that could go either way. And I do think that it's likely to have made some improvements from the last time we saw it tested. Is it enough to overcome somebody like Chiesa? That I think is a live question. So AJ, how do you feel about this fight?
I feel like it's really binary. If Luque keeps the fight upright, he should be able to pick apart Chiesa and maybe even finish him. There's not really a scenario I could imagine Chiesa outstriking Luque, even though I thought his striking, to James' point, looked better than ever last time out against Magny. He was cutting different angles well. He just looked more comfortable on the feet. He wasn't closing distance like a zombie like he typically does. He was popping out a jab. He was actually closing distance intelligently. And so that's nice to see. Luque is just more dangerous, technical. Chiesa still has issues with low kicks. Luque does throw them. That could be a problem. However, what I like about Chiesa when I see him strike is he, how do I say this? He accepts the fact that striking is not a strong suit. He's all the way out, not really willing to engage with you in the pocket, or he's all the way in, trying to clinch up with you. You guys did mention he does have some double legs, but it's been a lot of body lock takedowns recently. Very strong from that position, from the clinch. Perhaps Luque catches him on the way in, but Chiesa, I haven't really seen him hurt in the UFC. He's never been knocked down. I know that Luque is debatably the biggest hitter, but he's also faced Masvidal. He didn't get knocked down by him, didn't get knocked out. I know you guys brought up he got finished by a choke. You guys brought up a good point about Luque, his takedown defense, but the glimpses I've seen give me confidence that if Chiesa closes the distance, he should be able to take him down. I mean, Randy Brown is a non-wrestler. He got an easy body lock there. Derrick Krantz got him down, took his back. Mike Perry was able to get some top control on him. And you guys brought up the Leon Edwards fight. You have to go way back. There was Michael Graves in there, but that was in UFC Luque's debut. You could give him a pass. But Chiesa, when I see him, like, he seems like kind of a new man at 170, right? The cardio issues seem to be behind him. He doesn't have excellent Kamaru Usman level cardio, but against Magny, he really impressed me there. He slowed down, but he pushed through it. Dos Anjos, that's a great win. Dos Anjos, he got over 10 minutes of control on Dos Anjos, which is interesting because Dos Anjos also fought Leon Edwards and Kevin Lee, obviously. And despite those two fights that Dos Anjos had going longer than the Chiesa fight, neither of those guys controlled Dos Anjos as long as Chiesa did. Very good with his positional awareness and top position, body triangle for back control. He doesn't do a lot of damage inflicting when he has you, but his control is so smothering that he could take Luque down, he could maybe take his back, and then that could be a 4-minute round of control. So I liked the point you guys brought up about the underdog price. I think that's where the value was. I think the line is more accurate now, but I actually line Chiesa as a slight favorite. I would line him more around -150 than the current price. So yeah, and I think that, you know, because Luque is the more potent finisher and he is the more proven guy at this weight class, that is why he was the favorite and why there's been some love for him here. But whenever you got a fight that's binary and you got the guy that I think is more than capable of landing the takedowns, which I think Chiesa is, control where the fight goes, I tend to side with that guy. I tend to think that they're favored. A matchup that comes to mind where I applied this sort of logic was Amari Akhmedov when he fought Tom Breeze. I know that got really dicey in there, but that was my process going into the bet, was that Akhmedov could take Breeze down despite being the inferior striker. So I like Chiesa in this spot. I don't feel like he's certainly not a lock, right? He could lose, obviously, but I think he should be a slight favorite here, and I think the value is on him at an underdog price.
That makes a lot of sense to me, and I think that either way in this spot, I think that you wanted to be on the plus money side. And so when Chiesa was the underdog, I think that there was a ton of value in playing him there. And AJ's talking about a minus 150. There still may be value if you agree with that handicapping for this fight. Now, I think that it's a fight that could go either way. I have not gotten involved yet either side. I would consider Luque if he hits that underdog price, which I think is not unlikely before fight time. Haven't done it yet, but that's what I'm thinking about. And I'm really excited because we've got 42 people live with us here in the chat. Everybody's lighting it up. Appreciate you guys. And we're about to hit onto this co-main event. And this is a hell of a damn fight, boys. Jose Aldo, Pedro Munoz, Pride of Brazil. That will be determined again. Like I've been talking about, it's just another showcase for this bantamweight division. This might be the best on offer all night. And just what a well-matched fight. You've got two guys separated just by a hair in age. And yet we have one guy who's basically had a whole career in combat, Jose Aldo, one of the all-time greats, a featherweight all-timer. And then we've got on the other side, Pedro Munoz, really been putting a stamp on some of his recent fights, some of his recent wins, was able to get one back over on Jimmy Rivera, avenge an earlier loss, gives credence to what we were talking about. It's never the same fight when you get a rematch a couple of years apart, and saw a lot of improvements for Pedro Munoz, saw them pay dividends as he was able to take out Jimmy Rivera. So, man, really fired up for this fight. I'm really fired up to hear what you guys have to say about this fight. I think it's a really interesting style clash. We got the pressure of Pedro Munoz and the precision, the counter ability, and the tension of Jose Aldo. There's a tension in the air when he fights. His body's constantly tensed. I love Jose Aldo fights. He's part of the reason I got so big into this damn sport. What a lot of fun this fight should be. We'll kick it to you first, AJ. Drop the hammer on us. What's going on?
It's a really interesting fight to break down. I think that Aldo should be the favorite. When I watch the two of them strike, there's pretty clear levels here. Aldo is more technical. His punches are just cleaner. He's also got a 5-inch reach. He's much more defensively sound than Munhoz, who just blocks punches with his arms, no head movement whatsoever. And then Aldo checks low kicks, which I think will serve him really well here against Munoz. He was lighting Rivera up with those kicks at distance. Rivera couldn't really get going. And Munoz, he's got some power, but I've overrated his power in the past. I mean, he went 5 rounds with Frankie Edgar, couldn't really hurt him. And then when I've actually gone back on tape and watched when he's hurt guys, it's body shots, it's his front kick, it's his low kick when he's hurting Brett Johns. So I'm not saying he can't finish Aldo, but I think that maybe his finishing abilities in this fight are a bit overrated, especially because he's unlikely to get this fight to the ground. Aldo has elite takedown defense. Munoz is not a good offensive wrestler. And Aldo is actually a very good submission grappler, as we were reminded last fight against Aldo. He's very good with his control. And yeah, I'm not expecting him to take the fight there, but it just comes down to how much attrition could Munoz impose on Aldo, because that's his path to victory. He's not going to go out here and pick apart Aldo because he's the better technician here. It's going to come through damage, through volume, through wearing Aldo out. I would like Munoz's chances a bit better if the fight was 5 rounds, but it's a 3-round fight, and I don't worry about Aldo's cardio as much. It's still a bit of a concern. Also, the regression. I mean, he still has enough in the tank to beat a guy like Munoz, but you just never know with a guy that's, seemingly near towards the end. He was on that incredible run, and then he's obviously lost some fights in there. And Munoz has proved me wrong more than once in the past. So Clearly, I have a tougher time reading this fight than maybe I should, but I'm going to side with Aldo here. I think that early he should have opportunities to land clean and hard on Munoz, and then it'll just be at a point where, at what point does Munoz take over? Is it in the third round? Is it halfway through the second round? He's able to swing the judges in his favor there, pick up 29-28 decision sort of thing. But I tend to side with the guy that should have success early on, and that should be Jose Aldo.
I think that's absolutely a fair point. And I think, honestly, though, that is my concern, is that I do think I saw Jose Aldo, and granted, I had a ticket on him when he was fighting. Why am I blanking on his name? Chito Vera. When he was fighting Chito Vera, I had a ticket on him there. And man, I was sweating, boys. When that third round was starting, I was like, Aldo is getting tired. I don't know that he's going to be able to stand up to him for another 5 minutes on the feet. And I was very worried. And then he wraps him up in the body triangle, and I'm sitting back, smile on my face, walking to the pay window, ready to go. And I feel like this is going to be, another sweat. I think Jose Aldo, could I see why he's the pre-fight favorite? Absolutely. Proven more, championship level fighter, been doing pretty well at bantamweight, all things considered, really had competitive rounds with Peter Yan. Looks like he hasn't been completely passed by this game. But then I'm also just like, the not having 3 full rounds of cardio for me is such a concern. And Pedro, I do think, is able to put it on somebody as the fight goes on. I think he'll be there, and he's so durable. I think, could he get torched by Aldo fast? Aldo's done that to a lot of guys, even really tough guys. His body shots are exceptional. But I think that Pedro Munoz is just a really durable guy at this stage of the game. I think he's more durable than Jose Aldo, and that's why I think this is such a compelling fight. You got skill on one side, and then you got will and potentially just some cardio and durability advantages from a lack of fight miles compared to Jose Aldo. And you also see the grappling pedigree of Pedro Munoz is very impressive. Jose Aldo is an underrated, sometimes criminally underrated grappler in his own right, but Pedro Munoz is just money. A lot of his fights in the UFC have been sub 2-minute finishes, especially early on. Hasn't been showcasing that as much recently. Been a lot of time spent on the feet, but he can quickly submit somebody in the guillotine. And if Jose is trying to level change, get the fight to the ground because he's starting to feel tired in round 3, Pedro is still alive to wrap that neck up and finish anybody. So, Jose Aldo, I don't think it's, very likely he'll be submitted, but I do think Pedro has to be respected in every fight that he's in because that guillotine is money. And I like the way he sets it up too. He does like a half walk around to the back. But James, how do you feel about this fight? Absolute banger. A lot of people looking forward to this one.
Yeah, so on my podcast, this was the fight which took the cake for the segment, the most exciting fight of the night. Easy fight to pick. Obviously, we had some good fights. We had some bangers to choose from. Song Kenney, Green Fiziev. But I chose this one, man. This is a high-level fight. Pedro Munoz. Jose Aldo's looked good in 135. He obviously lost to Marlon Moraes in the fight he arguably won. Then he fought Peter Yan. He was doing well in the first 3 rounds. Then he just started to tire out. Obviously, Peter Yan, he'll do that to anyone over 5 rounds. Most people in the division just melted Aldo there. But that is kind of the theme with Aldo, right? Like, even in that 3rd round against Marlon Moraes, even though he potentially won that fight, won that round, he still looked more tired than he was in the 1st and 2nd round. And obviously, it's a fight. You are going to. But it's that cardio that is just a worry for Aldo, right? It's like if Aldo doesn't knock you out, he's probably going to slow down. He slowed down in his last fight, Marlon Vera. Obviously, slowed down against Peter Yan. Slowed down against Moraes. Every fight in bantamweight, he slowed down at. The thing about the Marlon Vera fight was he was able to lean on that wrestling, like he was saying, Liam. He was able to lean on the wrestling in the 3rd round when he was tired. He's like, all right, I'm having a bit of the trouble with Marlon Vera now. Let me take him down. He's not going to be able to do that to Pedro Munoz. Now, Pedro Munoz, obviously, he is a bit smaller than Vera. He's a bit of a small guy. But as you said, very dangerous with the guillotine. Very good submission in general. He's very scrambly. I haven't really seen anyone control him. And look, potentially, maybe I missed that on the tape. Maybe there is some fights where that happened, but I don't know that anyone's control. I mean, even Aljamain Sterling went in.
I never saw it.
Yeah, I mean, and Aljamain Sterling even didn't attempt takedowns on him. You know, he didn't want to go to the ground. And Aljo, that is his wheelhouse, right? He just out-volumed him. They know the dangerousness, if that's a word, of Pedro Munoz on the ground, man. So I don't think Aldo can lean on that in this fight. And in this fight, I just kind of feel like Pedro wins round 3 at a decently high clip. I think Aldo probably wins round 1 at a decently higher clip. So it kind of comes down to round 2, right? And it comes down to maybe Pedro's going to come on strong in the end of that round 2, which will probably steal him that whole round because that's how judges score rounds. And then if he does win that round and he wins the 3rd round, he's going to win the fight. So for that reason, I do lean Pedro ever so slightly. In my opinion, minus 110 is probably fair enough, right? But for the sake of a prediction, for this, you know, because I have to give a prediction, give something to the viewers. I'll go a little bit against AJ. I'll say, yeah, I'm leaning Pedro a little bit. So I think he's going to be able to come on late. And another thing, one quick thing I want to bring up about this fight is that I think both fighters have the styles to beat each other. So I think it's very interesting. Anytime you have that, it's always an interesting fight. I feel like Aldo has the style to beat Pedro because he's way more cleaner of a striker. His boxing is way better. His power is a lot more. And Pedro is so hittable, right? He's there to be hit. He's in the middle. He's in the pocket. He will get cracked. Everybody he fights cracks him, right? Aljamain Sterling couldn't miss. Jimmy Rivera in the last fight was boxing his face up. You know, he just couldn't put too much power because of his leg. So I think Aldo's going to have huge chances early to really hurt him. If I had seen Pedro Munoz hurt in any time in his career, like hurt badly or stopped, then I'd probably bet an Aldo in round 1 because I do think Aldo's going to land heavy in round 1. And I'm pretty confident in saying that, right? But then on the other hand, on the side of why does Pedro have the style to beat Aldo, it's because of that cardio, right? Because of that pressure, because of that pace. If you want someone to beat Aldo, you want a pressure fighter who's durable as fuck. That's Pedro Munoz. He is a pressure fighter who's durable as fuck. If he can if he can last the first 5 minutes, I think shit could start to get real sticky. Unless Aldo has him compromised so much from hurting him that he can't really get his game going, which happens a lot in fights, you know, like happens all the time. A fighter just gets beat so badly in the first round, they can't do much in the 2nd and 3rd round, which is what they would have done if they wasn't as compromised. So, you know, potentially Aldo with that body work, he digs to the body, he could slow Pedro down and we won't see that, you know, grinding Pedro that we usually see. But I am slightly going to lean Pedro to pull away in the later half of the round. It's going to look bad early, but he pulls away late and he gets the decision victory. But, you know, I wouldn't be surprised either way.
The Ryan Benoit fight, perfect example of the phenomena that you're describing. So I'm exactly there with you. Just wanted to credit, we got some people dropping real knowledge in the chat today. Aldo won the WEC championship when Munoz was 2-0 as a professional mixed martial artist. Shout out Uncle Weezy. Yeah, that's true. And it's something that we got to be concerned about. We got Z dropping. He's the smallest fighter Aldo has ever fought. 5-inch reach advantage. Fighters with a 5-inch reach win at 60%. Interesting point from Z's MMA. We got Narco Cop lighting us up. All-star lineup. True story, Narco Cop, and it ain't because of me. Believe that. Appreciate my guests. Thank you guys so much for coming on. So thank you guys for lighting up this chat. We're on fire heading into the main event. We got Cyril Gane. We got Derrick Lewis. What a main event banger. And the question on everybody's mind is, can Derrick Lewis do the damn thing one more time? He's just got this power in his hands, folks. He's kind of crazy. The success he's had, given his style, is very impressive. Derrick comes out there as an almost 300-pound man. He throws flying kicks to the head and the body. He sprints across the octagon throwing leather, a la Francis Ngannou against Rosenstrike. That's a lot of what Derrick likes to do. But he also, you know, he plays a very interesting psychological game. He's one of the best possum players I've ever seen in MMA, where it's very hard to watch a Derrick Lewis fight and understand, is this guy hurt or is he pretending? Because he does a lot of pretending, and sometimes I think a lot of exaggeration. You know, when he is actually hurt, he starts pretending like he's so hurt he can't move, so you run in and then he tries to just unload everything. But we've also seen that, you know, when he's in these extended fights, when he's in these longer fights, we see a little bit more tentativeness from Derrick. We see Derrick try and pace himself and struggle to pace himself oftentimes. That Mark Hunt fight seemed more like a cardio collapse from Derrick rather than an accumulation of damage necessarily from Mark Hunt, though Mark Hunt was piecing him up as the fight went on. So I think that this is a really interesting fight. You've got the technical precision of somebody like Cyril Gane, and then you've got the brute force prison strength of Derrick Lewis. What a damn fight. This company knows how to put on a fight, even when it is not the heavyweight title fight we're all looking forward to. They're able to sub in what I think is a pretty quality main event here for UFC 265. And we'll kick it to James first. Drop the knowledge on the people. How do you feel about this crazy heavyweight fight that everybody's been trying to wrap their brains around?
Pretty easy to break down, all right? I mean, I think you could listen to 100 breakdowns and you're basically going to be getting the same breakdown, right? Lewis is reliant on a massive shot. Cyril Gane's going to piece him up at distance, right? There's not really too much more to put on. I will say that Cyril Gane fighting just, around 2 months after he fought Volkov, 5 rounds against Volkov is absolutely crazy. That just shows you how good of a fighter Cyril Gane is. He was able to take virtually no punishment in that fight, and he can fight 8 weeks later against Derrick Lewis. I mean, Cyril Gane, very beautiful fighter. I love this guy. I guess he's a pretty boring, apparently, like people say, but I think he's amazing. Like, I've been betting on this guy since he came into the UFC, since his debut. I've been betting on his prop odds because he's always been like a -400 favorite. Other than the last fight, I bet him inside the distance in his first 2 fights. I bet him via decision in his next fight. Then I bet him to knock out Dos Santos in his second round in that fight. So I've been betting on this guy. I've been hounding him from the start. And I think he's going to roll here. I think he's just so much better than Derrick Lewis. But I will give props to Derrick Lewis because he is like probably the most unique fighter we've ever had in the UFC in terms of the guy I don't want to say he's not very good because he's very good at setting up that shot, right? He is very good at landing that one shot, but man, his cardio's not there. He doesn't really have too much. It's hard to break Derrick Lewis down, man. Like the guy, he seems to land that bomb a lot of the times, but it's funny because every time he goes back to the stall after like every single round, after every single one of his fights ever, he looks like he's been hit by a bomb. Like the guy is there, he's like, oh, like you think the guy's done, and then he ends up going 3 rounds with Luque, he ends up going 3 rounds with Latifi. He gets knockouts after he's almost dead on the stall. He's such an enigma, so hard to bet against because, as you know, he can just land a shot at any time. But the difference between this fight and a lot of his fights where he has either landed the bomb or won the fight, he's fighting against a striker who is just so much more seasoned than a lot of these fighters he's been fighting, right? I mean, the reason he knocked out Curtis Blades was because Curtis Blades shot in for a takedown, right? And he said before he was planning the uppercut. So Cyril Gane's not going to be shooting in for no takedowns here. He's going to be picking him apart at range. He can just stay away from him, kick him to the body, give him a couple jabs. He doesn't have to engage. Derrick Lewis is going to get frustrated, going to be running at him. He's not really going to be able to connect with Gane, in my opinion. I think this is Gane's fight to win all day. I think Gane should be at least a -400 favorite here. I don't give too much credence in Derrick landing a bomb in this fight, though it is always possible. So, yeah, I'm going to go with Cyril to get maybe a 2nd or 3rd round finish. As we know, Derrick is weak to the body. And one thing I will say about Derrick's career, when he fought Junior Dos Santos, who is somewhat of a similar fighter in the fact that, Junior kind of likes to play the technical striking game. Junior destroyed him in that fight, had him hurt multiple times. Obviously, Mark Hunt, good striker, durable. Yeah, man, I think this is Cyril Gane's fight all day, and I think he's going to finish Derrick Lewis in the 2nd or 3rd rounds. Derrick hasn't got cardio to go all 5, so he's going to end up crumbling if he doesn't crumble Gane, and I think Gane will crumble him. 3rd round TKO, my final prediction.
James, I love it. I wanted to just shout out. We got a lot of people lighting up the chat as well that are agreeing with a lot of what you said. We've got people on the under 4.5 rounds. Narco Cop hit a -160. Beautiful. Think that line is currently sitting around -185. And I still think that there might be some value there. I think that this is a fight that's very likely to end inside the distance. Cyril Gane, he's kind of been painted as this guy who can only go to decision now. He's won 2 5-round decisions, but the question is about who you're going against, right? We've seen Jairzinho Rozenstruik be in really low pace, 5-round, nothing happens decisions. We haven't really seen that from Derrick Lewis. It's just not how his fights tend to play out. Like, things happen during Derrick Lewis fights, and they're either explosive and in his favor, or it's him getting mostly pieced up. And I do think that, my concern if I was to bet this fight on the Gane side would just be that Lewis catches him with that nuke. And I think the under 4.5 really solves a lot of problems in that regard. And I also think that, Gane minus 300 or whatever he is, it's a little hard to justify those kind of prices at heavyweight. That's where it gets harder. But Gane is just so much more process driven, a lot more clean in his technique. I love Alexander Volkov and have made a lot of money betting on him. And the first time I ever got involved on the Gane train was in that fight. I'd seen too much. I'd seen too much clean striking mechanics on the feet. And I like his composure. I just think a lot of people get scared when they're fighting Derrick. And I think his experience and his poise under pressure is really what's going to make the difference for Cyril Gane compared to other Lewis opponents. But, that power from Derrick Lewis is something that really makes you pause, especially when you're going to make a financial investment. We've got the last word for AJ Schullo, the man of the hour. Drop your knowledge. What do you think, my man?
To me, Gane has already passed this sort of matchup in flying colors against a better version, essentially, of what Lewis likes to do. I'm referring to his fight against Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Rozenstruik, in my opinion, takes damage a lot better than Lewis, and he's a much more technical striker than Lewis is. And Rozenstruik couldn't really get anything off, really, at all. And just like Lewis, Rozenstruik will blitz when he sort of gets impatient, when he plays his whole counter game. And when I watch Gane strike, as you guys talk about, it's beautiful. He is able to hit you, slip out of range, so you're not able to counter him back with much frequency. Lewis gets hurt often to the body, to the head. The Travis Brown fight, he's almost out of there. Finally, Junior Dos Santos. And the interesting thing about the Junior Dos Santos and Mark Hunt losses were that those are those two guys' last wins in the UFC. And it's just amazing that the run Lewis has been on, obviously, but he clearly could be beaten by guys that, maybe we would think are much inferior fighters relative to Gane at this point. I mean, certainly we could say that about Dos Santos. Gane did his thing out there, won so in very impressive fashion. And that is essentially why I think that Gane could not only just dominate this fight, but finish. I don't think Lewis will be content to just stand on the outside like Volkov and Jairzinho did. He doesn't fight like that, especially in his home crowd. He will get impatient, I think, and especially, he could get very tired, as you guys pointed out. And to me, Rozenstruik and Volkov are much better technical strikers who are just more comfortable fighting at that range. Lewis, he might just lose it early. Maybe he just goes in for one of his Black Beast blitzes early, tries to go after Gane. He runs into a counter. A sneaky take, I guess. I don't think it's maybe the most likely thing, but I think something Gane could work in, as I think he could work in some clinch time. Lewis was controlled in the clinch by Latifi, a fighter he's much, much bigger than, and got taken down, couldn't scramble off of his back. The referee had to intervene and stand him up. Like Gane, he's not an elite wrestler by any means, but he's a capable one. I think he's got a duck under double leg that is very capable. He's got some submissions, even though he's not a great submission grappler. And Lewis's guard is easy to pass. And he gives up his back every time when he wants to work back up to his feet. Now, if Lewis gets on top of Gane, that could be some serious trouble because Lewis has that aggressive ground and pound. But I think we know who the better fighter is here. I never predict the fighter who I think their only chance is to win by knockout when the other fighter or the opponent, they have them covered everywhere, which is what the case is here. So I'll most likely pick against Lewis every time. I think the only time I've picked him the last few years was against Latifi. And even in that fight, it was certainly very close.
Did he beat Latifi? That's a real open question in my mind.
Yeah, it could go either way, right? But that's what you get. Heavyweight, you don't need to be the most technical fighter to move up your way the ranks. Clearly, Lewis proves that point. But still, I still think who is the more technical, well-rounded fighter wins fights over the long haul. And I'll just keep picking guys like Gane and Curtis Blades to beat Lewis. And sometimes I'll be right, and sometimes I'll be wrong.
Absolutely. And I feel like I had a little bit of buyer's remorse because, I went a little bit on the inside the distance for Curtis Blades in that spot. And my only regret was that Curtis didn't understand that he didn't need to wrestle to win that fight. I really don't think he did. Now, was it still a risk on the feet? Of course, there's a ton of risk on the feet, but he was piecing him up. He was easily outstriking Derrick Lewis. And I think one of the ironic things about Derrick Lewis's career, as I was watching back through it, is that Derrick Lewis has done a great job of, number one, exploiting wrestlers who he knows want to wrestle him. He's looking for patient counter shots. He's got a unique ability to get back to his feet from compromised positions by just posting out on somebody and removing his large body weight from underneath them in one swift motion. Very athletic. Not a lot of people can do that. So he's got a very interesting style, but man, I've seen a lot of concerning things when he goes against strikers. And I think that Derrick Lewis, he feels the best when you're afraid to strike with him, and he knows he can pick off these predictable type reactions. Wrestlers, if there's one critique you can make of us, is that we like to go to our bread and butter. We like to go back to where we feel safe and comfortable. So he knew Curtis Blades, he might be touching me up for a little while, but he's going to feel safe and comfortable shooting a double leg. All I have to wait for is this opportunity. Whereas Cyril Gane, I think, will feel safe and comfortable on the feet, as crazy as that sounds. And I think that should he decide to mix in his wrestling and grappling, I think he could do it in a much more process-oriented way. I think he can develop his attacks using his range striking, patience, poise, and then if he decides to grapple, it will be when Derrick Lewis is already compromised from a cardiovascular perspective. Whereas I think that Curtis panicked, rushed, and got caught as a result. I do think that Curtis is still a better fighter than Derrick. And I also think that, this is kind of the peak for Derrick Lewis. He had been at the mountaintop before, and Daniel Cormier kind of worked him really, really easily. So I think that this could be another opportunity where Derrick, because of his popularity, because of his marketability, because of the fact that he's able to spring these outrageous upsets, he gets another big opportunity. But I think that he's going to be shown a class difference as he has been shown before when he takes these steps up in competition. And we've seen former champions, the likes of which, Junior Dos Santos, well past his prime, take it to Derrick Lewis and really hurt him bad. And while we saw Derrick, again, use some of those tactics that I like, the playing possum, the hanging out, trying to unleash with these big hooks, at the end of the day, faking or not, he eventually couldn't answer the bell anymore. And again, JDS, that was like his last hurrah, his last salvo on the way out. So I think that Gane is the side here. I think that Derrick Lewis, if you're going to play him, play that knockout ticket. That's his path. I think that the under 4.5 rounds is probably going to look like a good spot here. We had a couple people wanted to shout out Uncle Weezy, say fight does not go to decision for the main event. Feels like one of the safest bets on the card. And the GOAT, Tajik Bey, was agreeing with him. So just wanted to put that out there, guys. A lot of us feel the same way. We think Cyril Gane is probably going to get this done inside the distance. We think it's probably going to be 4.5 rounds. I would say don't get out over your skis. This is still Derrick Lewis that we're talking about. I'm not going to put a tremendous financial investment against him, but I think that Cyril Gane is the side. And if I was to get involved, it will be a favorite or pass situation for me. But what I can say is we have a hell of a card lined up, UFC 265. We just hit it top to bottom, under 2.5 hours for a 13-fight card. I'm proud of this breakdown. Really excited that we were able to have two fantastic guests on. Really thankful that we still got 36 people riding with us all the way to the bitter end, and we appreciate you folks. So before we leave, if you could like that video, if you could subscribe to my channel, and if you could listen to these two gentlemen as they plug their work, it's always fantastic. It's always high quality, and it is always worth your time, effort, and attention. So first, I'm going to kick it over to AJ. Tell the people, please, where they can find you, and keep in mind that your links are down in the description box below. But anything you want to say on the way out, we really appreciate having you, man.
Awesome. Yeah. First off, it was awesome doing this with you guys. I appreciate the breakdowns, the insight as always. Thank you to everybody in the chat for participating, for viewing. And yeah, awesome event. I have 4 bets posted right now for the cards. If you like to tail, I am offering some discounted packages on my website, ajmmabetting.com. They're also available on dailyfanmma.com. Not only will you get my takes on there, but also technical Tim's and Brett Apley's as well, 2 other sharp minds, betmma.tips. Bets are all third-party tracked and verified there, as are for you guys as well. And you could also purchase my bets there as well. But yeah, I mean, cheers, guys. It was awesome. And looking forward to the event.
Absolutely, AJ. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And guys, I can't speak highly enough about all the work that Daily Fan is doing. Those guys are all very sharp. Please check out their work if you haven't already. I'm sure that you have, but if you haven't, you go check it out right now. James, where can the people find you, brother? Thank you so much for coming on. You're on mute, my friend.
Trying to do a big entrance and then I muted myself. I said I've had a lovely time. Thanks, gentlemen. Definitely do it again sometime. Hopefully we can help some of you guys in the audience make some money. Yeah, you can find me, Lucrative MMA. That's my Twitter. That's my YouTube channel, my podcast, Lucrative MMA Betting Podcast. My website, lucrativemmabetting.com, if you want to get all my bets. I have bets on 10 out of the 13 fights on the card. So no matter what happens, it's going to be an exciting Sunday for me in New Zealand. Exciting Saturday night for everybody else. But yeah, man, hopefully we can cash good cards. So hopefully we can make some more money, man.
Absolutely. That's always the plan. And it is the good guys. That's all of us. That's every one of you watching live. And that is the guys that I bring on this show every week against those darn bookies. We're trying to get one over on them. I think we've got a good opportunity once again this week. Wanted to give a shout out. MFN Hustler on the way out says Quinn is about to go live on YouTube as well, doing a breakdown with some other cappers. Just wanted to shout them out. Bunch of other good guys in the space, worth checking out their opinions as well. So thank you guys. Wanted to give a huge thank you on the way out to our two guests. I know that you guys have appreciated them. If you do, let them know on social media. Give them a thank you. We appreciate their time, effort, and energy. And I think it's going to be a hell of a card. Good luck to each and every one of you if you are taking action. God bless you all. Enjoy these fights. And until next time, we'll see you on Thursday. We're always picking fights at the same time. Liam Picks Fights Live. Thank you guys for tuning in.